6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
How about we do it again?
6, 7, 4, 3, 2, 1. I think I followed it.
Okay, let's try one more
I
time.
definitely
Ready?
I can move you. Making review. Making review.
Say
6,
5.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to the 200th episode of Rank and Review. That is the 200th episode of Rank and Review, and I'm as shocked as anybody. Here we are. We're going to talk about the Tremors franchise, that is to say the 7 feature films around the Tremors creature features. I know there's a TV series and a TV pilot, but we're going to save that discussion for another day. As of this date in 2021, there are 7 Tremors features, and Mr. Jason Dubray and your host and random Canadian Larry Parsons are going to have a little chat about all of them. Now, full disclosure, Jason and I have spoken about Tremors Bloodlines before, so that is going to be repurposed, that review from a previous episode, but you'll still have 6 brand new reviews of the Tremors franchise to fill your ears with. And my guess is that you might have some feedback for me, so you can send that feedback to ranknreview@gmail.com. That's ranknreview@gmail.com. You should go into the podcast, as always, knowing that there's going to be some spoilers, and knowing that there'll likely be coarse language, most especially from me. The website is ranknreview.ca, and we are going to be going on hiatus for a little while after this episode, so if you need new things to put in your ears, check out the Shelf Shedding Movie Show, hosted by this week's guest, Mr. Jason Dubray. Check out Cobwebs, a gothic horror podcast. Another friend of the show hosts that, the Terror Table podcast. A Lifetime of Hallmark. These are all friendly podcasts to Rank and Review. So by liking them, you are showing me love as well. Let's talk about giant underground man-eating worms. All right, we're gonna counting. I have Mr. Jason Dubray of the Shelf Shedding Movie Show here for the 200th episode of Rank and Review. This is a special occasion. Thank you for being here face to face. Even though it's the age of COVID, we're taking risks to mark an anniversary.
Yeah, and that's a big one. Congratulations on 200. I mean, at the point that we're recording this, I produced 37, and it takes a lot. And so I'm thinking it's a long way before I'm going to get to 200. But I love your show. I've told you that over the years. I love listening to every episode, and I feel like you've broadened my horizons as a movie fan, if you know what I mean. For
horror, at least?
For everything. Just,
oh, really?
Yeah, and, I think sometimes if the packaging looked pretty, I would give it a little bit more room. Then it's sort of a independent movie where everybody's putting their heart into it, but it doesn't look the best. And sometimes I think I was a little bit hard on those in the past. And now I'm looking for what's the intention of this movie, and is it successful in that regard. And now I'm bringing that to my own podcast too. So that,
I try to punch the same weight as the movie in a lot of ways. It's just like, if you're Christopher Nolan and you got $250 million, I'm gonna grade you on a different scale. Yes. And I think that's fair. I think that's just fair. Yeah. But it's weird. I also thank you for kissing my ass there and complimenting the show. I'm very happy with the show too. I like it a lot, and I'm glad that I've done this. It's significant to me that it be the 200th episode that we talk about the Tremors franchise. I love the Tremors franchise. Specifically, I love that first Tremors movie. And I thought I would use this as an opportunity to, I guess, this is not necessarily a full-on apology, but once upon a time, you and I discussed the 90s. We did a rank of the 90s horror movies. And I listed Tremors as my number 2 movie. And I don't know why. Like, I heard it back on the playback. Like, you laughed and you said, "Is Tremors your number 2?" And I felt, like, affronted. And my back got up, and you can actually hear my voice, like, Tremors is my number 2, motherfucker. Like, I get, like, totally, like, hey, whoa, defensive about it. Like, this is a personal thing. And I'm talking specifically about the 1990 original feature film.
Yes.
The sequels, I think I have grown to enjoy quite a bit, especially now revisiting them with my kids. But that singular experience of the first Tremors movie, it was, in a way, everything I wanted a horror movie to be, especially at the time that I saw it. I loved horror movies, but I didn't like to be traumatized by a horror movie. I liked to be excited and a little bit scared by it, but I didn't want it to fuck me up. Like, I wasn't like, I wasn't looking for that yet. Sometimes I'm looking for that, but at that point in my life, I wasn't. And this razor balance that they have here, where it's a funny movie, but it still is a creature feature. It's still a monster movie. It's still, like, I guess, a horror movie in a lot of respects. There's giant monsters with tentacles coming out of their mouths and it's eating people. And my dad took me to see it because I begged him to take me to see it. And I just loved the movie so much. And unlike so many things, especially in that era of the early 90s that I loved so much, my opinion of Tremors has never wavered, like, even a little bit. I have to admit, so much was powerful was my love for Tremors that when the sequels first started coming out, I watched them, but I was very arms folded, snooty about these direct-to-video. They weren't what I thought Tremors deserved. In a way, for me at the time, the best-case scenario was they just left it alone. There was no Tremors sequels. It just stood as it was. And for what it's worth, it didn't completely die at the box office, but it wasn't in any way a huge hit. But this is one of those movies that, in spite not making much noise when it was released, everybody seems to be aware of Tremors. And they may not love it with the passion that I do, but everyone seems to be affectionately aware of the graboids. So, to me, it's kind of fitting that the 200th episode be Tremors. The 100th episode was a Coen Brothers episode. This is a Tremors episode. The first 2 movies that I bought when I started collecting movies in 1991 on VHS tape were Miller's Crossing by the Coen Brothers and Tremors. Here we are in 2021, thousands of movies later and 200 episodes into the podcast. And yeah, I have a very direct, personal, passionate love relationship with Tremors. I put that on the table, so maybe my perception will be skewed going in. What's your relationship with Tremors?
Well,
and I'm sorry if I snarled at you during the 90s episode.
Well, I think, this is, the 200th episode is very Canadian because we're apologizing to each other.
Correct.
I wanted to do a franchise episode with you, and we were talking about different ideas. And then Shrieker's Island came out and was available to buy in crystal clear Blu-ray. And I thought, why don't it'd be great to do a Tremors franchise show. And as means of apologizing to you, because I don't think when we were doing the 90s show that I knew you as well as I know you now. And I didn't get the personal attachment you had. The other thing was I was coming into that 90s show thinking they all had to be serious, dark, violent, extreme horror movies.
Right.
And the fact that Tremors is one that I first time I saw it wasn't in a movie theater, but I saw it in midnight on CTV or something. And I was like, wow, this is really good. And there's some serious consequences. Like, major characters are being introduced and dying. This is a really entertaining movie. But I guess I never took it as seriously as when I was thinking Silence of the Lambs and Seven and in the Blair Witch Project, movies like that.
Yeah.
I thought Tremors was so different from those ones that's why I think in the moment I just laughed, and then I felt so horrible about that, and I wanted to revisit the Tremors movies again and just kind of give you your chance to make a case for them. And the enormous cult following.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what it made in 1990, I think, when it came out.
It didn't lose money, but
No.
it wasn't a monster hit.
No. But we're talking about this 21 years later.
Yeah.
Right? And, or sorry, 30, man, I'm losing track of years. 31 years later.
Yeah.
Yeah. Holy
Wow.
cow.
We're old.
Yeah, we're old. 31 years later, we're still talking about it. And you can mention Tremors, and I've gone connected to like Twitter and all of these, horror movie nerds. People love Tremors.
Yeah.
There is something about it where a million other horror movies have been forgotten that we're still talking about this one.
It's still present. There is a very micro-budget movie called The Battery. Believe it or not, it's a zombie movie. Shocker that I watched it. And even in that movie, there's a bunch of survivors, and they're radioing communiques back to them. And they're excited that they've found a functioning television or DVD player, and they're going to do a screening of Tremors tonight. And then he starts going on. Have you ever seen it? It's got underground worms in it. And she responds over the radio, "Oh, I'm aware of Tremors." And I was like, I was already liking this movie, but
And
that
now it's
completely sealed the deal for me, right? Yeah, so big love for the first Tremors movie, and like the balance, like I said, like they're ridiculous movies, but they play it usually at the best of times straight. I think usually when they falter is when they lean too hard into the goofy for me. That's usually when I start losing patience with it. I don't think the first movie has that problem at all.
No.
I think what the subsequent direct-to-video and, well, direct-to-streaming or whatever we have going forward, direct-to-DVD seems like such an archaic phrase now.
Yeah, no. I don't know what age we're in with movies, to be honest. I don't.
The budget goes down when we go to the sequels, and it kind of chips away at it. And in some ways, as a Tremors fan, that hurts me. But in another way, it kind of is bearing it down to its sort of pure throwback 50s B-movie sort of essential qualities. In a weird way, another movie that I love from the 80s that I kind of equate to this, even though they're very different movies, is the remake of The Blob.
Oh, I love that movie.
Right? But it's a ridiculous movie.
It is. Yes.
It's a completely ridiculous movie. But when you watch the movie, it's played completely straight. And I think that's a tougher, menu to fill than you'd realize. You need to find actors that are game. You need to find actors that get it, that is like, yes, you're in a big stupid monster movie, but your character doesn't know that they're in a big stupid monster movie. And the script's winking, but you're not winking, right? You're still the character in the situation. And again, there's just either it goes to the scary movie sort of look at this obvious wink satire thing that too far, or it goes to undercut any kind of real stakes in the movie. So to get it right, to make it a fun, bouncy but absurd creature adventure, I think it's a taller order than people give it credit for. And I think that might be another reason why it doesn't get included in lists like best horror movies of the 90s. But I don't think that comedy should be a stigma. Like I said, An American Werewolf in London ranked very high for me in the 80s horror list. And I think a good case could be made that that's at least as funny as it is scary. So that doesn't spoil the meal for me. But it gets trickier as we go forward. And I think it tests your mettle as a Tremors fan going through these movies. So it's interesting. For me, I started off not liking these movies, kind of going in shields up, and then warming to them a little bit, and then revisiting them with my kids, kind of almost vicariously coming to just, I guess, in a way, give in to them. If that's the right term. I'm just preparing you. I'm going to be pretty generous. I think more generous than I typically would be to some of these movies than you'll expect.
This is the second time for your podcast I've gone through the Tremors
right.
series, with the exception of two movies. A Cold Day in Hell and Shrieker's Island were not out when we did a review for which one is the South Africa one? Yeah, Bloodlines. Yeah. And so my due diligence was to watch all that and all the sequels in between, and I think I think I had those, my arms were folded and like, okay, there's Tremors and then there's a bunch of other movies.
That's right.
Called Tremors. This time I just totally relaxed into this world and I had a much better time. There will be a couple where I have a thumbs down review.
Sure.
But most of them I would recommend to people. I'm not sure I was there last time I looked at the series. If you know what you're
getting into. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Yes. And I think it wasn't that long ago that, I don't know when 3 years ago or however many years ago we did that 90s show, but I feel like I've softened on movies like the Tremors franchise since then.
Right.
But I'll raise my concerns about each one, and I'm sure you will too.
As we go along.
But overall, I think this is a celebration of this series, but I also want it to be a celebration of you in this podcast.
And I'll be honest, I will call it a bad performance where there's a bad performance, and I will call out weakness where there is weaknesses. But let's be real. I also just wanted to say to our listeners, Jason and I have discussed Tremors Bloodlines before in our Monsters episode, so I'm going to repurpose that review for this discussion. Mm-hmm. I don't have much more to add. I think I listened to the review again. The only thing that I think we didn't really mention, and I don't think it's super important, is that in the Africa installment is the first time we see the Tremors have sort of got more prehistoric. They're a little bit larger, and the design on them have changed a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't think we mentioned that in the review, but for whatever reason, that design sort of sticks around going forward. But other than that, I completely stand by everything I said in that review from a few years ago. So
I think I would be a notch softer.
Right.
Than my review.
I was very mean to Jamie Kennedy.
that I'm not apologizing for. But there's some other stuff which I found this time around watching it that I liked more. So right. I'll maybe mention it a little bit more when we get to the rank. So.
Okay, good deal. Is that enough for an introduction? We kind of did quite the intro there. All right.
Perfection. A scorched outpost in the middle of nowhere.
You know how close I am to leaving this place right now? How close?
Maybe that's why Val and Earl decided to leave town.
Hey, hold up. That's Edgar Deems.
They just picked the wrong day to do it.
Jeez. You guys better get the hell out of here. There's a killer on the loose. Who could be doing it?
Is that a snake?
I'll give you boys $5 for this. 20. That's how they get you. They're under the ground.
What the hell are those things? How could they eat a whole station wagon?
But where do they come from?
I vote for outer space. No way these are local boys.
You see, they're headed right for us.
No Richter scale can measure it.
They're coming!
No scientist can explain it.
Bert, they're under the ground.
You didn't get penetration even with the elephant gun.
Run, run!
And no one knows what to call it.
Megaworms or suckers or suckoids.
Now, this valley is just one long smorgasbord.
Now, it's up to Val and Earl to save the world.
That's one big mother.
Who died and made you Einstein?
And they know just what to do. Flip for it.
Damn.
Kevin Bacon, Fred Ward, Tremors.
If I was to list movies in my life that I've seen the most, there's Jaws, there's the original Star Wars trilogy, and Ghostbusters would be on that list probably. Maybe it's a little bit embarrassing to say, but true. Labyrinth is probably on that list. I watched the shit out of Labyrinth as a young. But in the modern age of movies, maybe not counting my childhood, because by 1991 I was in high school and I was sort of becoming a movie guy. This is one of those movies that I can just go back to again and again and again. Mr. Dubray gave me a gift, a glorious looking Blu-ray of Tremors. And even though I've seen it maybe into the triple digits, I don't even know. I will happily watch it again. I am over the moon and kind of just a complete hoe for the Tremors. Like, I just love this movie. It's about a small town called Perfection in the middle of the desert that finds itself facing an unusual problem. Strange underground creatures that the local storekeep, Walter, named Graboids, have these weird tentacles that they shoot out of their mouths. They grab you and they hook you and they pull you under the ground and they eat you. And the two people who are sort of thrust into the lead of heroes are Kevin Bacon and Fred Ward, Val and Earl, the two local handymen. And real world, these small town guys, I don't know that I'd have much in common with them. But it was true from the very first time I watched the movie to the next time I watched the movie to the last time I watched the movie. I just love these guys. I like them so much. I don't know what the magic quality was, the chemistry between Fred Ward and Kevin Bacon. If it was just there in the script, if something magic happened, like if they were just putting actors together until they saw something, like, it's kind of a bromance, but it's not about the bromance. But it's like, we need to know and like these guys right away because they're going to be thrust into a ridiculous adventure. And that is accomplished just brilliantly. And also, I mean, all of the information that we're presented with, whether we know it or not, whether it seems obvious or not, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, comes up again later on in the plot. When Val and Earl are doing the garbage and bragging about how no one does garbage like we do, we also see the big grader, the big tractor that they're going to be using to make their great escape. When they're in the shop, at Walter's shop, and the Coke machine, all of a sudden the fan belt goes off, and it makes a terrible noise, and he talks to them about fixing the machine, but they can't do that right now. That actually comes back into play later on, because one time when everyone's trying to be quiet, the fan goes off on the Coke machine, and it costs the group, right? It's amazing to me how I've called movies like Black Sheep and others like guilty pleasure movies that smart dumb the script is, because like they are actually setting up a lot of things, but not in a really obvious in your face way, and they're doing it at service of, like I say, this B-movie monster construct. And nothing about the movie, as far as I'm concerned, doesn't work. In fact, the last time I watched the movie, I started to look for something that I was like, okay, put your critical hat on here. Find something negative to say about Tremors.
You're struggling.
I'm really struggling. I'm not into country music, but I guess like it's completely appropriate to the soundtrack. And if you have Reba McEntire in your cast,
have to, yeah.
You're going to have to get a song out of her. Like, it would be stupid not to. So, like, I'm not taking any points out of that. Like, nobody in the cast is weak. I guess maybe the teenage kid who we visited later on in Tremors 3. He is shrill, but again, the character is supposed to be shrill. And even that character gets character beats when his uncle dies in front of him. Yeah. We're allowed to see his humanity for a second. Bert knows how to manipulate him into running by giving him a gun without bullets in him. Like, the character still pays off. We don't necessarily like him, but we know him.
Yeah, he's not supposed to be likable, and I guess that's a clever follow-up in the sequels.
Yeah.
That
he
as an adult, he's
asshole.
An even bigger douchebag than he is in the movie. So
anyway, I've gone on and on in my prolonged introduction. I fucking love Tremors, and I'm not going to change my mind. That's not going to happen here today. I don't think there's anything you can say or anyone can say to change my mind. Spoilers. It's number 1 on the list that we're going to talk about. What?
No.
Heartbroken. So, geez, I promise I won't get mad at you, but Dubray, what do you think of Tremors? I think I've made my point. Can you see my erection from across the room?
Unfortunately, yes. I think looking at 5 seconds into this movie, we are right away introduced to Kevin Bacon and Fred Ward. And yeah, there is something about that chemistry. I mean, this was the era kind of all through the 80s and then into the early 90s where we had these buddy movies.
Yep.
And for some reason, I don't think they, played up. They would talk about Mel Gibson and Danny Glover and all of these other pairings in action movies. But Fred Ward and Kevin Bacon, who knows why, they work so well on screen together.
But they do.
And they try to duplicate this in sequel after sequel in this franchise, and it doesn't work. No matter what. Burt has so many different pals and buddies along the way, and being the character who carries the franchise forward.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't work, and I don't think it's just the writing. I don't think it's just the directing. I don't think it's just... I mean, I have to credit the actors. I think... And I'm surprised that they didn't work together again at some point, because that looked like kind of gold, but maybe they didn't want to do it in some other project, and then it's doesn't work, and then it ruins. I don't think anything could ruin the legacy of Tremors, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's going to be the number one for me too. I don't think that's shocking in the least.
Look, a lot of people have turned around on Tremors. A surprising person who turned around on Tremors? Kevin Bacon.
Yeah, he was negative about it, wasn't he?
Well, at the time he was making the movie, he felt like his star was fading. He had a really successful 80s.
Yeah.
Like, even the low paycheck movies he got at the beginning of the 80s, Animal House and Friday the 13th, were huge fucking movies, right?
Enormous.
They were high profile, right?
Yeah.
So he was doing well for a while, and now all of a sudden he feels like, I'm in this worm movie, right? And his wife was pregnant. Apparently, she gave birth while he was on set. He got called off set to go be with her while she was having a son. So I think it's one of those things that at the time, he was really stressed out. But now, looking back, it was actually a really amazing time in his life, because he was all about doing this TV show and doing this new pilot again. And he said, I saw him interviewed, probably might even be for the set that you got me. He was talking about, like, it's one of the few movies of his that if he channel surfs into it, he may actually watch for a while. Usually he doesn't like watching himself, but Tremors can actually involve him.
Wow.
So I'm saying, if it can win Kevin Bacon back,
then it's going to win Jason Dubray. I guess, I mean, some pretty talented people behind this, too. Like, Gail Ann Hurd was a producer.
Yep.
Now, I have that right, that she's married to John Carpenter?
No, she was married to James Cameron.
It was James Cameron. Oh yeah,
for a time.
Yeah,
they are no longer married.
Yeah, but she wasn't she involved with Terminator? Like,
yep, she produced the Terminator franchise.
I knew there was somebody big that she was married to.
Yeah,
but she's a really good producer, and
absolutely.
I think she maybe should be given a bit of credit here. And Ron Underwood's direction is terrific throughout. But he did. There's people in there, the dad from Family Ties and Reba McEntire, who thought to put those two together.
Michael Gross as a crazed gun nut. At the time, that was completely stunt casting. It was completely
He played the liberal hippie on Family Ties, and then to be like the other end of the political spectrum. And Victor Wong, I mean...
obviously great.
Grab some really, really... terrific people. They weren't A-list people at the time, but they worked well as this ensemble. I'm a bit of a sucker for movies, kind of southwestern types of movies, and one set in this abandoned town. Like, I guess one of the things I'm sad about in some of the sequels is they get far away from perfection. I like the stories that happen in perfection, because it just feels like a really cool, like, neat location for a film, and I never get tired of it being used. And I guess they had to make it bigger and expand the world a little bit, but
even when they do, though, they go to another isolated community.
Yeah.
So they're always trying to refine perfection in Africa or in northern Canada.
Nothing's better than perfection, though.
No, they started in the right spot. But I think the idea is this community is fully intact when we arrive. Like, it's such a small community that everybody knows each other almost by necessity, right?
Like 14 people in the town or whatever. Yeah.
Like, everybody keeps an eye on each other, because that's just how they do. But, So if you're going to change it up, like I get the instinct, well, let's see graboids in Mexico or graboids in Africa. I guess the instinct is there, but like to change the location but not change fundamentally what you're doing with the project will only remind us of the great movie that we started with.
Yeah.
I say if you're going to make a change, right? Yes, but we're talking about Tremors.
Yeah. So you can't find a flaw with the movie, and I understand because it's a very personal. So I'll throw some things out there. My list is pretty thin, but maybe this is just my issue here. I think some movies want to be R-rated, but they're sticking to the PG-13 model, and I think that's really the case with this franchise. And with Tremors, I think there's opportunities, and they pushed PG-13 as far as they could, I think, with kind of the gore and the violence. I watched this, and a few of them, my sister was in town. She'd never, I don't think she'd even heard of the Tremors movies, and she was at the edge of her seat through this. So
Nice.
The intensity worked, but some of the ways, like they give Kevin Bacon his one, fuck,
Yeah.
and that's the only one they can use. But
they earned
they
it.
have Mother Hummers is used to avoid the R rating. So some of those pieces in there, I think, I don't know what the advantage was or why they didn't go to R. And maybe it's fine because as you talk about it, like you can watch these movies with your kids right now and you don't feel too worried about it in the time, like the place you were at when you watched this in theaters. If it had been R, maybe you couldn't have. I don't know.
Like I said in the introduction, it's fun scary. It's not traumatizing scary.
Yeah.
Some of the later installments do get a little bit gorier, I think. To defend the choice to go with the PG thing, typically I can be a little bit bloodthirsty with my creature movies. If you're making a monster movie, I want to see the monster, and the monster's going to do bloody business. But I understand that this one's sort of going for that sweet spot where it's also a fun movie. I think that when they do give us that one, fuck you, and it's earned. And they make it a character quirk of the Fred Ward character that if he ever says anything to untoward, he always says, "Pardon my French." And it sort of becomes like this thing where everybody's almost out of just deferring to his personality, careful what they say around him, because pardon my French. It's like they're just courteous to each other, and
like the love interest scientist towards the end says pardon my French after she swears.
We're gonna run like goddamn bastards, pardon my French. But again, like nothing's wasted in the movie. That's another prime example of that. Like they use that for her character later on too.
Here are the two other things, and feel free to greatly disagree with me on this one.
Oh, I'm gonna play D.
Yeah. The music score feels very Back to the Future 80s to me. I actually found the score distracting. Picky point.
I mean, I didn't seem inappropriate. Like I said, I'm not a country guy. It's sort of, there's a lot of that twangy guitar to it.
I don't mind some of that, but there was a little bit of like the action score felt, I don't know. I don't know why it was Back to the Future it reminded me of, but it felt a little bit like, and it was a studio produced film, so that makes sense.
I can agree with you to go so far as to say it's not a very sinister score.
No.
There's a few times where they're using, like, what's that? Is it a didgeridoo? Like, it's like, I think it's an Australian instrument. Like, it's almost like a signifier that the Tremors are around, or it's just passed by.
Yeah.
And that kind of works for me because it's kind of got this weird alien sound to it. But for the most part, it just sort of seems countrified and sort of regional and appropriate. But it doesn't draw attention to itself. It's a weirdly, other than that one night sequence, it's a broad daylight movie. And I think they sort of act and feel like they don't go far beyond the premise as far as that. The monster's enough to scare you. They don't do a lot of like, wait for it, or they don't do a lot of like, oh, the music's coming up, something's about to happen.
Yeah.
They're playing a different game here.
Yeah, I think it was just the general... there was something about the music that just took me out, like I was in a different movie than the one I was in.
Right.
The country stuff I didn't mind, and yeah, the sound that you're talking about with the didgeridoo, I didn't mind that either. But the general kind of action score just felt like it belonged in a different type of film, I guess. And here's the one that's maybe a bit of a harder one. I've come around. Fortunately, I've come around on Michael Gross. Like if you didn't like him, I think the next 6 movies would be tough going. But this time around, I'm still not completely convinced that Reba McEntire is that good in the film. She's a delightful presence to have, and my sister was like, Reba McEntire's in this? Like she...
I will say, nor is she bad, particularly in the film. Like, she didn't stand out to me as bad. She doesn't have an awful lot to do. No. She does a lot of support work for Bert. I do like, there's that one scene where she's cooling Bert off and walking away, and she's like playing along. Yeah, I know, he thinks she knows everything, you know, like she sort of plays along to try and cool him out. But I think she's adequate to the job. Mm-hmm. I think that the producers rightly thought it was a good thing for the movie to have Reba McEntire in it. And the fact that she expressed interest was like probably a lovely surprise for everyone. And a lot of times that stunt casting stands out in a really ugly way, whereas I would argue that wouldn't happen here. It didn't happen here. She didn't blow me away, but I wasn't like, oh, she's clearly not an actress.
No, she can act, for sure. And I've in the things that she does, her niche area, I think she's maybe a bit stronger than in this. But I mean, I remember being excited to see her in the movie initially, and maybe she brought some of like the country music songs they used were a little bit easier to get the rights to because she was involved with the movie. So from a producing point of view, it makes sense. But that's all I have. Like, I really enjoy it. I'm
not a country fan, but Dropkick Me Jesus to the Goalpost of Light is going to make me smile every time. Finn Carter. Finn Carter plays Rhonda Levesque. She's one of the few people in the movie that's not necessarily one of those recognizable faces. Like, whether or not you know Michael Gross, when you see him in this movie, you'll be like, oh, okay, that's Michael Gross. And like the guy who plays Walter, Victor Wong.
Victor Wong has been...
Like, whether or not you know who we say when we say Victor Wong, if you're looking at a picture of Victor Wong, you go, oh, I know that guy. Right?
Yeah, Big Trouble in Little China.
For some reason, Finn Carter is the one member of the cast who hasn't seemed to achieve that notoriety. And I think she's awesome in the movie. And she she's still been working. I looked up her IMDb. She does a lot of TV. She's kind of one of these, in a way, enviable acting positions where she's been working fairly regularly, but kind of invisibly. But I just wanted to shout her out. Both the character, like in that she's not overly sexualized, and she does, I guess, have one rescue me scene, but I don't know, I feel like it's earned. She gets caught up in some barbed wire, and it's not that she's helpless. It's like a traumatic situation sort of presents itself, and everybody has to deal with it. It's not, Hercules questing into the lair to rescue the maiden fair, right? It's a different thing. And she's the one name that always gets missed whenever I talk about Tremors, so I wanted to make sure to hit Finn Carter.
Thanks for doing that. The other thing I want to credit, not just this movie, but the sequels with, is female characters get in on the action
all the time
and are very intelligent.
Yep.
Like they don't have, I mean, it's a criticism of horror movies that they have two-dimensional or one-dimensional females as basically objects for the male hero to have as a sexual object or a girlfriend or whatever. I mean, there's a bit of an earned romance in here, but she can hold her own, and I appreciate that about the series. I don't think there would be too many arms crossed looking at this through the the Me Too lens.
Generally speaking, with the exception of the Michael Gross characters, they don't tend to deal in like overly familiar constructs, especially with the female characters. And I like, not only are most of the female characters strong, but they're also equally up for grabs. A lot of times in the movies, if they have that alpha female character, you're like, oh, she's safe, nothing's going to happen to her, right? No, Tremors,
not always.
Tremors will eat, they'll eat a lot of people. Yeah, I don't know what more I can say about the original Tremors. I have reviewed it before on the podcast. It's a personal thing. I know plenty of people like Tremors, and that's it. They've watched it once and they put it behind them, and that's fine. That's a good thing. I have this special fascination with it. It's it was one of the movies that helped me to fall in love with movies.
Yeah.
It was a real triggering thing for me. And it was sort of crystallizing what I'm looking for, in especially at that time in my life for horror. I wanted it to be scary, but I wanted to have fun. And this movie just is that, to a way that it's hard to compare.
Yeah. I've watched it 4 times, and it's a lot of fun, but it also has some real scares. So it's a worthwhile film. It just unfortunately didn't make my list of the
Not quite the
20
best of the 90s.
90s horror movies.
Bert! Bert! You okay?
Bert? I feel I was denied critical, need-to-know information.
Come on, Bert, what happened?
Well, when the radios went out, I decided to return to the refinery. But en route, I find I'm in an ambush situation. Must have been a couple of dozen of these things. Well, I dropped the first wave with semi-auto fire, but they just kept coming. Sheer luck, most of them were in front of the truck, so I just popped it in the 6-wheel and ran them down. The ones that got on board, I handled with a combination of small arms fire and hand-to-hand techniques. I am completely out of ammo. That's never happened to me before.
Okay. Tremors 2 Aftershocks. Fred Ward is involved in this production. And it's directed by S.S. Wilson, who was one of the co-writers of the original. And the co-writers stay on. And this duo, whether or not they're writing or producing, they seem to have some kind of hand in the Tremors franchise as we move forward, to whatever limited degree. So one of my big complaints about it when I was younger is this isn't what it should be, or this isn't true to Tremors. I guess that argument is a little bit moot, because it's sort of like the Hannibal Lecter thing. Mm-hmm. Like, I, as a fan of Hannibal Lecter, didn't want Hannibal and you know...
Red Dragon and...
I didn't want Hannibal to, like, hook up with Clarice Starling and have adventures with her together as a couple. That's not something that I ever wanted for him or for that series. But that's what the author wanted. And I guess whether or not that's what I wanted, I'm going to have to just live with it. So I guess to that same extent here, we're going to see the new evolution in the Tremors monster. And it's going to continue to evolve. Mm-hmm. And younger Larry was very committed to the graboid. The whole land shark premise. The whole floor is lava thing that Tremors really established. That sort of lit up my imagination. I didn't really feel the need to, you had a good thing there. As far as I'm concerned, they didn't need to make a sequel at all. But if you are going to make a sequel, be respectful, damn it. So yes, when I watched this movie in the 90s, I was not very kind to it. And I just sort of felt that was a cheap, they wanted to make money off of people, and they did. And I was one of those people, and Upon revisiting it, I find a lot more charm to the movie. And I think that a lot of it has to do with what your approach is. What do you want out of Tremors 2 Aftershocks? What are you hoping to get out of this movie, okay? It's half the budget of the original film. Mm-hmm. And they've changed the location to Mexico. There's an oil company that has been losing workers on the fields. Things are shutting down. The money taps are closing. And they need to deal with these graboids. And the only people they know of who's ever dealt with them are Val and Earl. And Val's married, presumably, to Finn Carter. I'm going to say in my
It must be, yeah.
In my head canon, that's what's happening. They're making cute little babies somewhere. And so he's not interested in endangering his life. But Fred Ward has not managed his money well at all.
He missed out on some opportunities.
Yes. He missed out on some opportunities. Other people made money off of him and off of his story, but he is like a failed alpaca farmer, and just as, or maybe even more pathetic than he was. I will argue more pathetic because he doesn't have his buddy with him. He's kind of sad. So partly because he needs money and partly because maybe he doesn't have much to lose, he agrees to go to hunt these creatures in Mexico for, was it 20 grand a head? Some ridiculous figure anyway. He was going to get rich quick doing this.
Yeah.
And because he dealt with them before, he'd had come up with a pretty clever way of hunting them. He uses remote control cars with C4 attached to them. When they grab the car, he triggers the explosive. Shouldn't be a problem. He gets a buddy, a very obvious Kevin Bacon light replacement. Can't remember the name of the character or the name of the actor as I'm speaking, which sort of speaks to the strength of both. But I say that as unkind as it sounds. He's not terrible either. He's just, because you know him as like the stand-in, he might as well be a cardboard cutout where Kevin Bacon is supposed to be. He becomes a very dismissible character for that. I spent the whole movie waiting for him to die. Actually, I remember the first time, and it kept on not happening. No, we're supposed to like him for some reason.
Grady Hoover is the character's name. Chris Garton is the actor.
Yes, well, my apologies to Chris Garton. I'm sure he's fine.
I know I had a problem with him too.
A lot of it is my attitude towards the movie, especially the first time I watched it. But twist. The graboids change. They evolve. They find a gutted graboid has turned into these 3 other creatures, shriekers, who are now able to hunt through heat signature. And they realize right away they're in over their head. Good thing they called in Burt Gummer for backup. Look, it's not a great movie, but I will say it's actually a good movie for what it is. Like, the special effects are a little bit early 90s computery, but at least it's the early 90s. If this was the early 2000s, I'd be a little bit harder. But it's the early 90s. And I went with it. There are supporting characters that you flag right away. Oh, you're an asshole and you're going to die. Oh, you're an exposition machine, and once you finish your exposition, you're going to die. And you're absolutely right about everything and all of that. But
unfortunately, you're Mexican, you die in this particular film.
Yes, that is true, but yeah, you're right. I'm not even going to defend it. It's true. It's just a true fact.
But it was the mid-96, it looks like, so...
I don't think they were going to kill Fred Ward. I think I would have been mad if they killed Fred Ward, and most of the other characters were Mexicans. But anyway, you're right. The Caucasian people survived in this movie. I'm not going to fight you on it. But I am going to say I've softened significantly on it, and when I was watching it with my kids, this broke my heart a little bit. Both of them agreed that they liked Tremors 2 more than Tremors. And it was everything to do with Burt Gummer. But they got excited by it. There's a scene where we think Burt Gummer's been left for dead, and he comes back and he's covered with gore and he's shot every single bullet that he's had, and he's furious because he wasn't given enough information.
Which is a catchphrase throughout the series.
Yeah, he keeps on coming back to this later on. I was denied valuable information. It's fun. It's fun. It does the job as a cheap monster movie. It is exactly what it says it is. Don't fight it, and you will have fun.
Yeah. And when your kids are in their 40s and they look at this over again, they'll go, yeah, Tremors is better than Tremors 2. But that's fine for now.
That's the benefit of youth.
Yeah. As I revisit movies, I realize the ones that I didn't like were better than I thought, and ones that I thought were just amazing are a little bit more down to earth. But I like Tremors 2 Aftershock. I kind of wish they'd stayed in perfection for the sequel, but it's still kind of got that Southwest vibe, and it on the whole, it works well. I'm glad Fred Ward stayed on for another movie. He plays some moments quite big, but going forward, I need to realize, like, it's, and this is less of a cartoon than some of the chapters we'll talk about soon.
Yeah.
But that's just how, that's kind of what it is going forward here. And I think the actors were up for it. I like Helen Schaefer. Really good kind of, even 70s, 80s horror movie character. Yeah. Like, she was in Amityville Horror, and I think she did Tales from the Dark Side movie, I think. Yeah. And she's kind of the No, she isn't kind of. She is the love interest for Fred Ward.
He didn't realize it's been his basically sexual obsession
yeah.
of his entire life.
Yeah, that's the closest they come to sexualizing a woman, because they have kind of this 1976 Playboy centerfold thing.
But again, it's in a playful way.
But and it has a purpose.
Yeah.
It isn't just exploitation.
And there's not some like gratuitous titty or beaver shot or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
There's kind of this sort of...
Yeah. It's kind of sweet.
Yeah.
And it's, again, here we have an action series which they kind of, among all the action, everything that's going on, they have a romance between a middle-aged couple.
Yeah.
You know, which nobody was doing. So, I mean, I think as I look at it, like, there's some fairly progressive things. It just wasn't apparent, and particularly, 6 years after you saw Tremors in theater and were blown away by it.
How many horror movies about a guy in his midlife, like 50, early 50s, trying to make peace with the fact that he's not where he wants to be. Basically, the arc of the movie isn't necessarily the Tremors are back and we destroy the Tremors. The arc of the movie is Fred Ward's character is lonely and miserable at the beginning of the movie, and at the end of the movie, he is no longer lonely or miserable.
And same with, like, Burt Gummer is, like, he's making it out like he's really busy with all of these things, but he's kind of sitting at home doing nothing.
He's been divorced. And
he's so happy to be able to, and he hasn't really been honest about the fact that, Reba McEntire's left him.
Yeah.
Forget her character name, but
he's got this idea. It's just been an ongoing separation, but you get the idea that the separation has been many years.
She went to visit some aunt or something, but that's
she ain't coming back, and everybody.
So
knows
I do feel like that theme kind of resonates. So it is a much better straight to video second chapter in the series than maybe it has any right to be.
Yeah.
I think there are a few things I'm a little bit resistant to, and some other chapters surprised me later on a bit more. So this one's maybe a little bit more in the middle than I expected it initially to be. But I like Tremors too. I mean, I wouldn't steer anybody away from it now that I have a bit of perspective on the whole franchise to this point.
Yeah. And I think another thing that my kids connected to is that the movie values brains over brawn in a way. Like, yeah, Burt Gummer's like a shit kicker, redneck guy with a lot of guns, but they have to figure out what the new variations of the creatures, what they do, and how you can best defend yourself from it. And with each new iteration going forward, it's sort of how quickly you're able to adapt that becomes rewarded. It's not how brave you are or how...
And the graboids, it was established in Tremors, that they get smarter as they go along, and the Shriekers are no different. And then, of course, we're going to start talking about ass blasters in our next film. So I kind of appreciate that the creatures get smarter. They aren't just one thing, that they're just creatures to be blown up by the characters. And then the characters have to regroup and think about what to do. So there is intelligence in those aspects of the screenplays and the series, even if...
It increases their threat that they get smarter.
Yeah. Even if the comedy, to me, and some of that stuff doesn't work going forward, I can cling on to that.
This might have the best percentage of Burt for me as far as what you want in a Tremors movie. I controversially, as much as I like Michael Gross and like the character, I think for me Burt works better as a supporting player.
Your kids won't like that.
My kids would fight me on this and will fight me on this.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I think that was the first time I went through the movies. I was thinking, I was getting annoyed by him.
Right.
This time I was just relaxed with it because I knew
what
was
you're
coming.
getting. Once you kind
of... And I appreciated, I mean... That guy, and I'll be saying it probably throughout, I mean, he's a sport.
Yeah.
I mean, he knows exactly what he's doing, and has kept him working in film for...
He's in his 70s.
Way longer than a sitcom dad normally gets to work. So
that's right. And it wouldn't have been terrible for him to be known as the dad from Family Ties, but I think it's better for him to be known as Burt Gummer, or even better for him to be known as both.
Yes. Yeah. Shows his range.
But I think, especially in this movie, like, we don't get him for almost the first half of the movie. So when we get him, it's like, yay, Bert's here. And then when we get those Bert payoffs, it's like, we're not grounded in that place, you know. In this movie, structurally, it would almost make sense if they had killed Bert off in that moment. I didn't believe for a second that they were going to do that.
Never. No.
But, like, he wasn't the main character of the franchise yet. And I think that has pluses and minuses going forward. I think, like, again, I don't know who your main character is going to be, and I think it would kind of suck if we needed to reinvent a main character for every chapter. And I get you got Michael Gross; he's going to be your tether from movie to movie. Just embrace that. But there's something about that character, because he is a cartoon. He rides the line. I understand why when people are writing for Burt Gummer, we get things like the Lion Cage and Bloodlines, where it's just like they hit the stereotype too hard, and then we can't be scared, or it stops being fun and starts being silly. Anytime we get too aware of how silly this all is, it falls apart.
It doesn't work, yeah.
And it doesn't do that in Tremors 2.
Yeah. One more thing.
Yep.
Picky thing. A character disappears from the movie completely. The head of that oil company.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't know what happens to him. I also don't know how they get paid for all of this, because nobody's there at the end.
You're right to point it out. Similar thing happens in the next movie.
Yep. Yep.
In Perfection, Nevada,
Go, go!
there's a whole lot of shaking going on.
Boy!
Can't run a business where your customers get eaten.
Tremors 3, Back to Perfection. This time, they've mutated into the perfect killing machine.
Great. Graboid? What? Are you kidding? For real?
Now, only one team can stop these beasts. Michael Gross returns as Burt Gummer, obsessed survivalist.
And people call me paranoid.
Jack Sawyer, trusted sidekick.
You do know which end the bullets come out of?
I've seen movies.
Jody Chang, second-generation grocer.
So this is really serious.
I keep trying to tell you.
These three warriors face the ultimate challenge. Tremors 3, Back to Perfection.
That's why we're at the top of the food chain.
So I recently reviewed, actually, this movie for my Threequels episode. So, I mean, I've already been on the record about Tremors 3 Back to Perfection, in that I think it takes us back to the first movie very directly, and there's very obvious pluses and minuses to that. I think the biggest plus for me is Ariana Richards. I didn't mention her this time around when we talked about the first review. In that movie, she's the cute little blonde girl on the pogo stick, but I've always thought of Tremors as her practice for Jurassic Park. Her practice monster movie for when she did Jurassic Park a year or two later. But she kind of comes back, and she's not really the main character of the movie, but she's kind of one of our more clean connective tissues. Like, you feel like things should have gone better for her subsequently to the previous Tremors movie, but her mom is still poor. She can't afford to go to college. Instead of loving the charming town of Perfection, she now kind of feels trapped there. And there's this scuzzy guy, Jack Sawyer, shows up into town, and he's giving tours and trying to show people the dangerous terrain that is Graboid country, and make a cheap buck off of this community and sort of insinuate himself into it.
Him and his idiot friend there who does the scare effects for him. So, yeah. And
they did a sort of nice passing of the torch for Walter's restaurant. Sorry, it's a local store. It's not a restaurant. But his granddaughter's now running the store.
Yeah, the convenience store.
It stayed in the family. And we're going to find out that the store's been in the family literally for generations, because we're going to go in the prequel going back. But I don't know. I didn't mind that. I always liked Walter. Whenever that scene comes up and Walter dies and Tremors,
it's a tough one.
No, Walter, no.
Yeah, we didn't talk. We talked about it a long time for Tremors, but yeah, I just like Victor Wong, and he creates lovable characters. But
we love all of these characters to the point that Miguel, one of the characters, who
That
survived
hurts.
the first movie.
Yeah.
And he's in the second movie. And in both movies, he's just there. Like, he has like a dozen lines in both movies. And most of them are like, yeah, I'll get something for you. Like, it's like very tertiary character. And yet, when, you know, he goes over the radio and informs everybody that they got Miguel, it really hurts. You're like, dude, not Miguel. Shit. So it's kind of funny how we are kind of affectionate towards these characters, no matter how small and peripheral. And, like, the movie works better than it should. I will go on the record. I've said it before. It's unpopular, but it's true. The ass blasters was never something I wanted for the show. Like, even if they wanted to do that creature design, the fact that they're called the ass blasters and that it just opened up this whole can of worm for fart jokes that the movies just didn't necessarily need.
You know, I'm not a fan of
yeah, but they're also just clearly, of all the three creature permutations of this, the least interesting.
Yeah.
They fly.
They fly, and they're the feature of this movie, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
This is kind of the next step. And yeah, I do think, I mean, one of the things that's kind of fun is that the characters, through their casual conversation, end up naming, like, the graboids came from a conversation in Tremors.
Yeah, well,
and certainly that everybody knows that these are graboids.
Yeah.
And so they try to play on that here with, it's blasting from its ass or something. There's some conversation like that, and that's how it gets its name. But the fact that that's the name that gets, you know, we deal with for the next however many movies is kind of too bad. I like revisiting the characters from the first movie. I like that part. I mean, I guess as far as a complaint I had a little bit with the Ariana Richards, Mindy, she seems like a bit of a flake. Doesn't she?
Well, I mean, I imagine myself growing up in a town of 15 people, especially when you become like a teenager and you've got that.
And there's
like,
one dude there that's attractive, yeah. But I like, in a lesser movie that would have turned into some sort of, that was the romance of the movie,
right.
But they went in a different direction. Predictable direction, probably. I mean, with Walter's granddaughter there. And she gets in on the action. Susan Chung is her name. Jodie Chang is the character. But and so, I mean, this was along the lines of the women are front and center. It's not just Bert and whoever the Kevin Bacon substitute is for each film.
I was trying to reconcile. I don't know if this is an Asian stereotype or not, but her very frugal business practices again, I don't think they were making a statement. I do think they were trying to be funny, but like, I didn't know how to take it, I guess.
But the thing I thought, giving the movie more credit than maybe it deserved at the time, I don't know, is that she was trying to move that business out of being like for a town of 15 people into moving towards the 21st century. And so she was trying to develop herself as a businesswoman, and this was kind of the stuff that she was doing. And so the idea of kind of lending things out, I think she realized what, what's his name again? Desert Jack Sawyer.
Yeah.
What he was, which is basically a con artist.
But he was going to bring
and then when he
business.
makes his money, he's leaving town, and he's going to leave her with the bill. So that's where I think some of that came from.
She also knows he's going to bring business to her.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I get that there was dimension, right? That wasn't her defining characteristic. She also kicked ass when she needed to kick ass. And she was also a strong character.
Solve problems.
There's just something about it. Like, it felt like they were, whether intentionally or not, sort of flirting with a stereotype, maybe.
Yeah, I wouldn't completely disagree, but I might defend...
I wasn't offended by it. I just clocked it. No, I don't want to make a big issue of it. There are other things. They have this subplot with Michael Gross's watch. And where I complimented the writing in the first movie, how they were really sneaky about like working things into it, this is something that I was just so fucking far ahead of. And the movie really wanted to be clever, really wanted to have me figure out, like, yeah, it's clocking you because of your watch. I get it. Like, maybe it's because I was trained from the, like, no little detail is unimportant from the first movie, but it was just like, I really felt that. And I guess the one I didn't get is, like, why were they bothering with this albino tremors? Like, what was the point of the albino worm? And nope, there was a plot point to that. Yeah. If they keep the relatively harmless graboid albino thing, which apparently is not going to erupt into shriekers, they've determined somehow that they won't further develop the land, and perfection will remain perfection.
They can't reproduce, or I'm not quite sure the logic behind that.
But again, or if that's good for perfection, because don't they want to develop perfection to a limited degree to increase the business to the store and to the community? I don't know. But they stopped the asshole guy from coming in and building a bunch of condos, which was really evil for some reason.
Yeah, who is the teenage boy from the first movie?
Playing the same character the same way. Yeah. Again, but doing exactly what's asked of him.
Yeah. So that's the payoff there with these albino. I found it strange where like Bert wants to shoot and blow up everything that. Suddenly, like this one graboid is his friend at the end of the movie, and he's going to make sure that nobody comes in here and messes with our land. But maybe that's a bit of and perhaps a stereotype about small towns. They're happy with how things are. They don't like change.
They would rather the graboids as a change than
they've
the
been
big
concerned,
city money.
They've been concerned that the town's going to disappear at some point if people leave, because they tried to find ways to keep, in the first film, to keep Kevin Bacon and Fred Ward from moving on to the next town where things probably would have been better for them, but
I think somehow the CG actually got a little worse for the third movie.
Yes, it did. Yeah, it did. Yeah.
There's a protracted scene in a junkyard where they're sort of being dive bombed by the shriekers, and there's a real noticeable look, like when the shriekers jammed in the window biting at it, there's a puppet there, and you're like, oh, creature effects. There
I like that. Yeah.
And then they cut to one of them flying in the sky, and you're like, cartoon.
It looks bad.
And well, if almost to the point where if they just stuck with the bad CGI, I would have went with it. But every now and then they would cut to better practical effects, and the difference between the two things took me out of it.
I didn't clock why I was, and then I was like, I noticed how bad it was, but I was like, I'm ignoring this because this is a straight-to-video movie from the 90s, right, or whatever.
But you can almost clock it, like wide shot bad, close up good, wide shot bad, close up good.
Yeah, and I was just, because the practical effects were so good in Tremors, I kind of, would it not help their budget, or is it worse for their budget? Is it cheaper to put in the computer effects, because they do stand out, like kind of like flying saucers in an Ed Wood movie?
Yeah,
they don't take me out of the movie completely, but it's certainly something that, like, if you show this to younger audiences, and I don't know how your boys felt about it, they'd be like, that looks so fake, or that looks stupid.
I don't think they were fooled by it, but I don't think they were bothered by it.
Mm-hmm. That's fine then.
I think we're in this uncanny valley area. I think in another 10 years, it'll almost be exactly like watching an Ed Wood movie, where you can basically see the wires holding up the UFOs or whatever, and that will make it charming in its own right.
Yes, it will be,
but it's weird. Going back to the Blob movie I talked about in the cutting-edge special effect movie of the 80s, but you can still see the cracks on it. Mm-hmm. And it's funny how a cutting-edge movie... Independence Day, that's almost a better example, because it's exactly that. It's a big budget version of a cheesy B sci-fi movie. Those were amazing cutting edge special effects. But you watch Independence Day today, and it's very computery in a kind of charming throwback way. I don't think that the creatures in Tremors 3 have made it there, but I think they might actually get there.
Yeah.
So where it becomes like watching the old Harryhausen stop motion thing. Like, you're not fooled by it, but you're charmed by it.
Yeah, I think that's possible. I mean, what I like about this movie is they went back to perfection, as the subtitle promised.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to revisit the characters. I don't know that this is as good as 1 or even 2.
Not on a script level.
Not on the script level. And, I mean, the action is fine. It entertained me enough. I wouldn't steer people away from it. But so far, like 1, 2, and 3, diminishing returns each time.
It's almost too reliant on your love of the original.
Yeah. There's winks and nods all over the place. I mean... Yeah, they'll mention something and then like, oh, that reminds us of the first movie, which was so much better. And every situation here is so much better in the first one. Yet I'm happy to see that they actually like cared enough to remember the secondary characters from the first movie, and at least they make an appearance, and some people have a lot more screen time in this movie.
There's a team of government researchers who vanished from the movie, as mentioned.
Yes. Well, don't they get attacked by, and then that steers them off completely?
There's one lone guy, but you really get the feeling like there was a scene deleted. Like, these guys had a card to play in the script that they either couldn't afford to or chose to cut for some reason or another. And I also want to give props to a sequence that I think, as a concept for a Tremors movie, is as good as any of the sequels have come up with. Where Bert is actually swallowed by one of the creatures, but he's got enough air to radio the guy to say,
"Yes,
get it to my house." And hits the barricade, and he gets chainsawed out of this thing. I mean,
he's covered in goo, which is...
Yeah, and somehow the chainsaw doesn't cut him. There's a lot of yeah buts. Yeah,
if you think too hard about it, it's...
Look, if you fight any of these movies, you're going to win. But... the idea that Burt Gummer is such a badass that he could be swallowed whole by a graboid and still have fight in him, I think is pretty awesome.
That's pretty good. And there's a payoff in a later chapter referencing that incident, to a greater or lesser degree. But it's still... there's still follow-up in these movies.
He knows graboids inside and out.
Yeah.
And you know, that sequence almost sort of appealed to the little kid in me. Like... if there was a sequel that was the sequel that I wanted to Tremors, maybe that sequence would have been in it, right?
Yes, yeah.
Is there anything else you want to say about Back to Perfection?
No.
I feel like I've done short shrift, but I have very recently talked about it.
I heard your review with Scott.
Yeah.
And I think you were, and he was pretty hard on it, I think.
I was playing deep.
I like it. I like it more than he seems to like it in that review.
Right.
But... it's not as good, but there are worse in this series.
I don't think anyone's hearing the same level of passion from me that they heard in the first movie.
Not so much, no. And I'm kind of in between two myself, so.
Unexplained noises, unusual disturbances, and unnatural sounds will finally surface.
They're coming!
Now, to battle the worst of the worst,
Are they following us?
this small town will recruit the best.
You're gonna hire a gunfighter.
Who might you be, sir? Black Hand Kelly?
Tremors 4, The Legend Begins, the exciting feature-length prequel to the smash hit Tremors, starring original cast member Michael Gross,
We stand our ground and fight to the death.
with extras you can't miss.
You missed with a cannon! Was that them?
Tremors 4, The Legend Begins.
Tremors 4, The Legend Begins. So, I think everybody correctly felt that it was time to shake things up a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you're going to do a mix of a genre, I mean, it's already a horror comedy, which is mixing genres anyway, but now it's a horror western horror comedy. Right there, you got like a lot of balls in the air, a lot of masters being served. And when you're going to mix a genre, you kind of want to ask yourself, like, do they complement each other? What works about it? Like, I'm a fan of the horror western, but I acknowledge it's incredibly niche. And then I also have to ask this question, like, what is it that we like about the Tremors franchise? We like the creature effects, and I guess increasingly we're being asked to follow Burt Gummer. So watching it with my boys especially, I think my boys were a little bit put back that they don't get Burt Gummer. Maybe they get a little teaser Burt Gummer in the final seconds of the movie, but this is him playing a very straight, very different character, which might have been a nice break for Michael Gross.
I think so.
We're still in Perfection, but it's at this point, I believe, called, was it Redemption or
No, it was a more pessimistic
Desolation or something. It's got a really negative name.
I'll get it right away here. So.
And sort of the seeds of the town, even as we understood it from the 1990 movie, are somehow represented here. There's an old Fred. J.E. Freeman, an actor that's worked with the Coen brothers, plays old Fred in this movie, and we had an old Fred in the original movie. And I feel like the Asian family that is running the town store, or like Walter would be a descendant of theirs, and like they're trying to have their cake and eat it to a certain degree.
In a town of rejection.
Which
I should have had, rejection.
Yeah, Perfection, rejection.
Yeah.
So,
which is a bit on the nose.
But thank you for getting us there. I'm even going to leave the struggle so that everybody could... There was somebody screaming the answer at the movie. So I appreciate that they're changing it up, but there's also playing it safe. I like that they kept Michael Gross, but they're keeping Michael Gross, but leaving the character, which is kind of the driving reason that we're on board. I guess what I'm asking is, do you think they changed the game too much? Is that like, is this their version of Jason in Space, where like, yeah, you fuck with the formula, but now this doesn't necessarily feel Tremors anymore? I also have a controversial opinion of the actor Billy Drago.
Yeah.
He was good in this movie called The Untouchables because he plays a really sinister character and he's got like 5 or 6 lines. And I think he's got a couple of good scenes here. But I think generally, as an actor, he's terrible. I just don't know. I can't sugarcoat it. I've just never been impressed. I feel him acting. I can't even articulate why. So there's something about that actor in particular. And he plays a hired gun. Michael Gross's character owns a mine, and the mine's being shut down because they discovered graboids, and they're killing all of the workers and terrifying people away. So he shows up, and he's acting all hoity-toity and very dismissive of all the town people. The only person he's very, even slightly warm to is the little Asian boy who kind of have his little bond with. But his character has to grow a lot through the course of the movie. And that's another thing about this chapter more than the other ones. That it used to bother me, it bothers me less upon revisiting it, but more than any of the other ones, this feels comfortable with taking its time. That is a thing that they've borrowed from the Western milieu.
Yeah.
And that is the thing that maybe works the least comfortably within the Tremors environment. In the end of the day, what do I think of Back to the Perfection? I used to think it was the least of them. I don't think it's the least of them, but I still think it's...
The Legend Begins, you mean?
The Legend Begins, sorry.
Yeah.
I said Back to Perfection. It's, I think, unfortunately, a continued progression downward. Like, I like what they're trying to do here, and it's not loudly awful, but I don't think that it's better than Back to Perfection. I think, like, I can applaud the ambition, but maybe not as much as I applaud the finished product.
We aren't going to match on this episode.
Oh dear, you like this one?
Yeah, I think, and I liked it the first time I went through the series, because I think I was a little bit...
Worn
out from the first 3 movies, and I needed something different as a bit of a break before we get into this next generation where perhaps I have a few more problems
right
with it. And we've talked about this before that we did an episode on Westerns.
Yep.
That I seem to, as I get older, appreciate Westerns more and more. Like, this is not an A-level Western. I mean, the writing is not there. But I like the idea of looking at the town and what the town used to be and going through like an Old West type of thing. I don't know if this movie was shot in Canada. There were a lot of Canadian actors.
It certainly feels Canadian.
Yeah, I mean, you can look up that one while I kind of ramble on about why I like this movie. I think it was a break for Michael Gross to show... in case anybody had forgotten that Burt Gummer is a character he plays, but he can play other beats and other types of characters. And this was a little bit more of like playing the snobby type of character and having this arc where over time he changes. I mean, it is very choreographed. He actually runs away from his responsibility and the mine and the town, and then he stops to think about a solution, and it's there's some sort of a charm about it, and I think the town itself works well as a Western town, as an Old West town, but also in contemporary times as a small town in Nevada. So I liked that change, I guess, enough to recommend it, and I think this may be controversially Michael Gross's best performance of the 7 movies.
Well, he has a character to play.
Yeah. Burt Gummer is Burt Gummer from beginning to end, and he has these little moments where he sort of changes a bit because of the circumstances, but not that much. But the fact that this is a guy who won't pick up a gun at the beginning of it, and then we're like, well, this is quite obviously the descendant of Burt Gummer, and based on what everything is being set up for at the end of this movie. So it's interesting for me to see how do they get to the point where this guy turns into this gun nut.
They tease that at the end.
And at the end, I mean, there's a couple cheesy things. The sitcom freeze frame at the end of the movie. Some of the writing is, I agree. The performances are over the top, but I would say that about even some notes in Tremors. So
it is a B monster movie. I mean, if you can't go over the top in a B monster movie, when can you not?
And to me, I kind of feel like some blood and gore kind of returned to this one. The deaths are significant. I wasn't kind of going, oh Lord, like they're trying to PG me with this one as much as some of the other ones. I
felt like I was supposed to be surprised at times. I was like, I think I was supposed to be shocked that the gunslinger got killed, and like I wasn't shocked
because it said
yeah. It was shot in California, for the record.
Oh, okay.
I think one of the reasons that you might have made the thought of the Canadian vibe, so many fucking westerns are shot in Alberta and British Columbia, and a lot of things that low budget westerns have in common is this thing where like they have horses and they have the western gear, but all of the horses are pristine and all the clothes are pristine, and they don't want it to get too dirty or rough looking.
Part of it's the cast, though. I mean, Sarah Botsford, who plays Christine Lord, who runs the hotel. She's been in a ton of Canadian television and Canadian movies. And August Schellenberg, of course, the Painted Door movie, and he did a lot of work in Canada as well. So,
hey, dude, if you want me to be in a Tremors movie, watch me show up with a big fucking smile on my face.
Yeah, exactly.
Here I come.
So I think that's why I was fooled into thinking it was Canadian, but none of the other chapters, even the one that's set in Canada, is quite clearly...
Well, and due respect to Canadian productions, it probably just because it looks kind of low budget, right? And it is low budget.
Kind of.
There's a lot of low budget productions,
but there's a charm to it that I got out of this.
And look, I started off with the negatives. Like I appreciate what they're trying to do here. They're giving us like, how are they going to deal with it within the confines? Like with the tools that they have in the Wild West, how do you deal with the graboids? Yeah. And I like that they gave us established rules, like this warm creek was dug out of the mine and it thawed out these eggs. So they actually have a reasonable count of what they're dealing with, and they don't know about the evolution of them or anything yet. But we get a little bit more lore about the creatures too. It's not even just the backstory of the town, but the backstory of the creatures gets further explored. And for a low-budget movie, you got a lot of strikes against you. If you're doing a period piece you're low budget, damn. You've already got the creatures to deal with. And again, the CGI is here, but the close-up monster attacks look decent to me.
Looks better to me than Tremors 3.
Yes, I will definitely say that the effects have gone up. I also think this is more of the nighttime settings. I had problems with the sequence, but I like the idea they were going for, that the creatures were eating away the floor of this huge barn that they were in. So they had to figure out what they were going to do before the floor was not eaten away. They were dragging it away a piece at a time. But I like those ticking clock problems that they had to solve. In the first Tremors movie, it was like, we're stuck on this boulder. How are we going to get off? And every now and then we sort of find those quandaries. And that was a good one.
I also like the mine.
Yeah.
Like going underground and it's dark and it's...
Of all the places to bump into one of these things. Yeah.
Like there's nothing you can do.
You are fucked.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I guess there's this thing if you like a movie, you're willing to forgive a bunch of stuff.
For sure.
And if you don't like a movie, then you're going to pick away at things. This is one where I just... I've enjoyed it both times I've watched it.
I don't hate it. I think I used to really have it in for the movie for some reason. But again, I think if you go in with the attitude oh, here we go with another Tremors sequel, right? No, I mean, none of the Tremors sequels, if I'm honest, are what I wanted in my brain a Tremors movie to be. So at some point, I just had to reconcile that wasn't ever going to happen. At some point, they're going to do a remake of Tremors. And whatever it is, it's not going to be what I want it to be. And I'll have to reconcile with it. I'm going to watch the shit out of it.
Oh, of course. Yeah, I will too.
So, again, it is all right. But I think we're kind of in the middle ground here for me.
Yeah, and I like it maybe more than it deserves.
There's something too adorable about the relationship with the little kid for me. I think
with
the kid
him and the bike and everything. Yeah. The kid does it.
He's a great actor.
He's actually better than the two children actors in Tremors. I would argue. Yeah.
I'm just as a familiar use of plot and character. We know what's happening here, and it's just okay. But it's not. It's the familiarity more than it is the execution. It's just.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like for you, The Legend Begins was the one that you had to revisit to soften on. Bloodlines is the one I had to revisit to soften on a lot.
Shall we move on?
We shall move on.
We have a situation in Africa.
There's been another attack.
You've got bad boys. Worms. Sure as hell ain't Mickey Mouse.
From Universal Pictures comes the next chapter in the Tremors saga.
The bitch is back. Load every gun. Come to Africa. We'll have some laughs, see some game.
Tremors 5, Bloodlines.
So Jason, here's the thing. I love Tremors. I love Tremors. By that I mean the 1990 original Tremors, starring Kevin Bacon and Fred Ward. And who would have known that would have been such a potent comedic combo? But I think that movie, at risk of sounding hyperbolic, is fucking brilliant. I really, really do. As far as that kind of cheesy B-movie monster thing that is both fun and entertainment and has some genuine thrills and great creature effects, almost an unbeatable sort of in its niche of movies. And then we have these 5 direct-to-video sequels, and the 6th on the way this summer. And it's always been disappointing to me. I've always been disappointed with the Tremors franchise, and I always come back to the Tremors franchise because I love it so much. I just can't quit you, Tremors. But it's based, I was told anyway, it's based off of an original screenplay from the same writing team that helped bring us the original
Tremors. Is the first,
and they've been attached, at least peripherally, to all of these movies, which is why I get increasingly kind of frustrated by them. I think that the problem with the Tremors franchise is that because they couldn't attach themselves to Kevin Bacon and Fred Ward because they had legitimate careers to live in. That's mean, but it's true. They decided to anchor the entire franchise on Gummer.
Michael Gross.
Michael Gross's character.
Yeah, the father from Family Ties.
That's right. And in the first movie, he and Reba McEntire are great supporting players. Mm-hmm. And I would say to this day, as supporting players, I love those characters. They're supporting players. I think putting Burt Gummer in the front seat of these movies was a mistake. Honestly, I do. I don't think Michael Gross is bad. I just think that character should be in the supporting place.
He had to take over the Fred Ward role after the second one. Yeah, for 3 and on. 3. Yeah.
And he's been in everything since. Here's the thing. They've changed up the monsters. It's no longer just one underground tentacle monster. They break into 3 screamer monsters that are heat sensitive, which in turn turn into the ass blaster monsters that fly through the air by shooting fire out of their ass. I think for them, these guys like the monsters. They like designing the monsters, and they're more reliant the deeper into the series on CGI. But I still, I guess, in a limited way, stand by. They want to show you a new monster a lot, and they're not just going to show you the same thing over and over and over again.
No. Each movie has a new evolution.
For me, I would have been happy to stick with them, but I appreciate what they're trying to do. They're trying to change it up their game, give you a new monster. But the humor in the first movie was always very charming and character and situation based, and the humor in the sequels are a lot more pee and poop and fart. So I have to cling to the stuff that I like. What I like is the creature design and the action sequences, and I have to sit and put up with everything that happens in between. Jamie Kennedy is not much of an actor. And the screenplay, the movie is called Bloodlines, really wants to shock us with the fact that he's going to eventually tell Michael Gross that he's his son. And it's the most telegraphed punch in the history of fucking cinema. It is brutal. So here's how you should watch Tremors 5, and you should only watch Tremors 5 if you're a person like me.
You have to keep going with this story.
You just like, someday they're going to redeem this franchise, right? Anytime they're not directly dealing with the creatures, skip to the next scene. And then you'll have, I think, an amusing 40 to 50 minutes. Unfortunately, the movie is 96 minutes long.
And it's a shorter one. Like, a lot of them are in the 2-hour range in a time when movies like this are under 90 minutes.
It's not good, but on the right day, it's a good bad movie. That's where I start.
Okay. So those who are listening to this who know me, just forget about everything you've thought about with my movie tastes forever. So I have a real soft spot for Tremors.
Thank you.
The one that you're a fan of.
Yeah.
Do you remember when CTV used to show horror movies or kind of genre movies at midnight?
Right.
Yeah, and they don't seem to do that really anymore. And this movie came on. I couldn't sleep because I'm not great at sleeping. And, kind of whatever. It's got this kind of southwestern U.S. type of look to it. And, Kevin Bacon I knew, and I thought, Reba McEntire's in this. I'll watch this thing, and the setup and everything, and then the payoff. I thought, I'm really enjoying this. I'm not sure this is necessarily the type of movie I normally watch, but this cast is good. This is a great idea for a movie. And then I would go spend years going to video stores, and every once in a while it's, there's Tremors 2, there's Tremors 3. Well, there was no theatrical release, so this probably isn't that fantastic. So I went many years not watching any of these. So for this is how much I care about this podcast. I went and I watched, refreshed myself on Tremors. I watched Tremors, and I've watched all of the prequels leading up to Tremors 5. And what kind of surprised me about this was because I had such low expectations for each and every one of these sequels, there's a certain charm about Tremors I just cannot get past, where I kind of like aspects of these. I kind of like. I know you don't want him to be the guy who is, the through line for the series, but I kind of like Michael Gross in this role. I just like to see him get work because I don't know. I like to see what happens to these sitcom fathers long after their shows are done.
Yeah.
And he's done a lot of B movies, and some of them a lot worse than Tremors. So I was fine with them, and I even like 4.
Oh, really?
I like this
for what it is.
Yeah. I think they were out of ideas. Okay, so let's go back into the past and go to when the Tremors first showed up. And I kind of like that idea of the changing the name of the town to, that all worked for me. This one, from beginning to end, I hate it. I just hate. I thought maybe this will be the strangest list that I've ever had on Larry's. Maybe this will not be number 6. Everybody, when they see a 5 in it, will think, okay, Jason's gonna go that this is the worst. But I have no choice, and it's the stuff that you so beautifully put a few moments ago. There's a scene where continuously for probably about 10 minutes, something is peeing on Michael Gross.
Yeah.
And it's like I felt bad for him that at this point in his career, this is what he has to put up with. And the second that Jamie Kennedy came on screen, I was like, no, couldn't they have gone, where's Carrot Top? I mean, couldn't they have gotten...
You know who would have been better?
Anybody. Because they've had other people, not well-known actors too. Who was the guy from a couple movies ago? Who's kind of the young hotshot who was supposed to be kind of like... They always try to work it out, so there's a Kevin Bacon type of character and a Fred Ward type of character.
And that's what's missing, because that's the heart of the first movie, is the relationship between Val and Earl, and their back and forth, and how much we like them. And Bert is like this divorced, survivalist, gung-ho gun nut, right? And again, I think he's a useful tool to have, but that's not where I would have centered it. I get why they made that decision, because they can keep Michael Gross. It becomes his franchise, and I don't think he sucks as an actor, but you're 100% right. I think that there was it was a kind of amusing sequence at first. He gets locked in this lion cage, and he's getting cooked by the sun, and he's starting to go crazy, and he's forced to drink his own urine.
Yes.
But I think I would have just rolled my eyes and let it go if he'd either poured the urine on himself or drank it, or the lion had pissed on him. All 3 of those things happen.
All at the same time.
All 3 of those things happen. At the very beginning of the movie, a guy's crouching to take a crap, and he falls into this hole, which sort of starts off as it's
such
so
a bad start.
Juvenile. It's so juvenile.
And the other ones had
as bad.
They had some moments like that, but not as overt.
Was never a thing I wanted for the franchise. Like, I just don't like that. I like the concept of the land shark and the floor is lava. It's basically the adult version of the floor is lava.
Yeah.
So I think that you need to find either someone that can bounce off of Michael Gross in a comedic way, where it's not about tension or it's not about reveals or conflict, where Val and Earl is practically a bromance, right? Those dudes love each other.
Yes.
Right? And we love them because of that. And that's the heart is absent entirely. I'm going to throw a little bit... They shot this in South Africa. That's their sort of way to
moving it
change
on.
It up a little bit. And there's this one badass South African guy who's always talking about how I'm invincible, I'm from South Africa. And then, of course, he gets brutally killed. And they tried. I'm not sure how successful they were to let some of that culture and color seep into the movie a little bit, to try in a way to differentiate it from the others. Here's the thing, I want to like the movie. That's
I can tell that you're wanting to.
I want to like this movie.
I kind of want to as well.
Yeah. So I'm cheering for the Tremors franchise, and I'm just like, no, you guys, do this a little bit, do that a little bit, because to my shame, as bad as this movie is, the new Tremors comes out this summer, and I'm not like, oh my god, more Tremors, but I will fucking get around to watching it. It will happen. And that's maybe just my fault. That's my thing. To everyone else, I just have to go back to watch the original Tremors. Treasure the original Tremors. And if you really want more, there is more. But diminishing returns does not say it.
Two's okay. Fred Ward was on for the second film. You could probably get something out of that. It's certainly not as good.
Diluted of all of them, I would say, but it's still 50% of the movie that the original was.
Yeah.
I'm not recommending this movie to anybody but myself, but I guess what you're checking into is how much I wish this was better than it was. It's got creepy monsters that eat people, and there's a 12-year-old boy inside of me that will always like that. I don't know what that is. And like I say, the design of the creatures is kind of interesting. Like
they're doing
again, what other movies do this? In like
Aliens kind of would try to
build the movie about designing a monster we haven't seen before and feeding a bunch of actors to it, right? Like it shouldn't be such a complex formula, but it turns out
this is another one where they tried really hard to keep the PG-13 thing going too.
That's the whole franchise.
And when they really hold back in what potentially they could do, but it goes back to the original was very PG-13 as well.
Hire a writer, you guys.
Yeah. Now there was an interesting character. Again, I'm grasping at straws here, but there was that other South African character with a pilot, and he was kind of like the Bert Gummer of because he just saw, was it his son or something, just got eaten by a monster, but then he somehow, it's kind of ridiculous how he survives this, but he has the same kind of energy and enthusiasm to keep on fighting after that.
He sees in Bert some sort of kinship, and they bro up pretty quickly.
A movie about those two guys might have been fine.
And that was the one moment of the movie where, like, when the giant worm jumped out and he swallowed him, and for a second thought he was going to be dead. That was when I was like, oh, that's too bad. I thought they were going to do more with that.
Here's the character I care about. Why couldn't it have been Jamie Kennedy?
Yes. I hate to be this mean to Jamie Kennedy, but dude, you were good in Scream and Scream 2, and that's all.
That's all.
That's all that I've seen of him that's watchable. He may be a passable stand-up comedian. He did this documentary about Heckler, about how, he is like the opposite of a fan base. He has the anti-fan base. And if you want to put that shit to bed, stop making movies like Tremors. So
types of characters he makes himself out to be just a giant douchebag.
I don't know what the appeal of the character is. He's not sexy. He's not particularly heroic.
He's not funny anymore.
He's certainly not funny.
No. It's like somebody who is stuck in this high school persona.
Yeah.
And he's kept that. I don't know how old he is, in his 40s now or something like that, and it has zero charm.
And it's gotta suck, that you're only getting offered things like Tremors 5 and Son of the Mask. Like, I get it. It's not an easy road to hoe. But, man, the screenplay didn't do any favors.
Oh, no.
In his defense,
this was the laziest of the five.
But he brings nothing to it.
No, he doesn't. At least Michael Gross is trying.
Yeah. And someone's trying. And as long as their heart's there, I guess I'm going to stay with them. But man, this is a low point.
It is.
How'd you get this number? You from the government? Impossible.
Improbable. Ass blasters in the Arctic?
Welcome to the Boyd Canyon Arctic Research Station.
If you've got ass blasters, you have graboids.
Incoming! Go!
Take a couple of tablespoons of cement and harden the hell up, huh?
A Cold Day in Hell. This is an unintentionally hilarious movie. Tremors, A Cold Day in Hell is an unintentionally hilarious movie. Bloodlines, you and I discussed in the past, and several years gap had happened in between the previous Tremors movie, and these two that were shot back to back in South Africa. The first one was terrible, but it was set in South Africa. Like, the environment made sense. This one is set in none of it, far northern regions of Canada. And I honestly believe, Jason, that the decision to set the story there was that They figured nobody knew anything about none of it. Like, it's a new province to us. It's not on most maps yet, right? And nobody knows what it looks like. And so it doesn't matter if it's lush and green and mountainous. And it doesn't matter if the snow is like powdered sand or flour. And it doesn't matter that the accents are very clearly South African accents. And the character traits, however cartoonish and over the top, are not anything that I've ever identified as Canadian, even by someone who's like ignorant and thinks that like we bowed with the altar of Bob and Doug McKenzie. But unlike Bloodlines, I have a fucking ball laughing at this movie. Not with, at this movie, okay? Like, a fair comparison is Friday the 13th 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. If you don't have the means with which to make the premise, don't make the movie. Just don't do it. It's like it's an exercise in folly. It doesn't have to be Canada, right? Now, maybe I'm particularly sensitive because I'm from Canada, but like, wow, you guys, wow.
But you're not from New York, and you're sensitive to
like
Jason Takes Manhattan.
And this isn't even Rumble in the Bronx, where like where you can see the mountains in the background of like New York. Like, that's hilarious, but like,
that ruined that movie for me when people told me about that ahead of time. But I'm looking for it.
You can blur your eyes in any back alley in Vancouver and tell yourself you're in any city in the world.
Yeah. But
you'd have to be pretty fucking ignorant to think that this movie was really set in Canada, let alone in the Arctic. And it's this hilarious idea of what people think Canadians will be, and this remote Arctic community will breed eccentricity. My favorite is that bush pilot chick. I don't know what exactly she's going for. I like what she's doing, but I have no idea what it is.
She had some energy to her. She said a lot.
Yeah.
She was, to me, the replacement for my favorite character from Bloodlines, who was that
old
pilot.
Wizened pilot.
Yeah, like he was so much fun, and this was kind of like they have a habit of substituting somebody for a previous better character.
And here she was.
Yeah, and they've done that with Kevin Bacon for years and years, but here they do that with that kind of secondary character. Yeah, you're right. It's an all over the place, but you get to admire she just goes for whatever she's doing.
Well, and then, like, she doesn't know what a Canadian is, clearly, but she's really going for it. I admire her moxie.
I want to get her name here just because I...
Thank you.
Yeah.
I've been rewatching these with my boys, so I've been looking forward to getting to these with them. But educational, right? Like, where you are in life was sort of change your perspective of how you see things. And I'm wondering if they're going to be offended. But the fun fact is like we were, after watching Bloodlines, which is my least favorite Tremors movie, shocker, I had said to them, don't worry, the Jamie Kennedy thing doesn't even come up anymore. Like, it's done. No, I was completely wrong about that. Jamie Kennedy is still in this movie. And even though I'd seen it recently, I had completely forgot he was still in the movie. But I was really mean to Jamie Kennedy in the previous installment. I don't know why, but I will say he bothers me significantly less in this installment. He doesn't have these stupid pop lines where, like, they have this card that they want him to play that's so painfully obvious. And he's got a couple of scenes where, like, he's got to milk the gland inside of this creature where he physically crawls inside of one of the worms. So he's got more fun things to do, at least this time around. He hasn't necessarily improved a bunch as an actor, but I'm not actively off-put by him.
Well, they're trying hard to make it like now he's Burt Gummer's son.
He's living up to the legacy.
And so he gets covered in goo, and that's just like his dad. And he's so concerned all of a sudden about his, this is the one where they have the payoff to Burt being inside of the creature years ago, and I don't know why it took whatever it was 15, 16 years for this to happen, but then there's some sort of a reaction he's having which could kill him, and they need to get antibodies from a live
Thank you for pushing the plot, because I'd failed to. Yes,
yeah.
Bert's getting sick. He's infected with some graboid disease. Yeah, it's a mess. There's also one of the worst callbacks ever. Like, when they kill the creature attacking the hangar, and he screams, "Broke into the wrong goddamn hammer, didn't you, you bastard?" Hangar, I mean, and like, it was one of those things like that was so lame that it made me feel lame for liking the line in the original movie. Like, it was just like, God damn you guys. Like, when you miscue hard. And again, neither of the South African made Tremors movie of a particular high quality. But I have to say, I did laugh a lot while I was watching this movie, both times that I watched the movie. It was for the wrong reasons, and it would be a so bad it's good or guilty pleasure thing. But I would mark it on that grade.
Okay. Yeah. Well, after Bloodlines, which I softened on in the sense that there's some pretty good action sequences. Once I got over the fact that we have a 15-minute sequence where Bert gets pissed on and drinks urine, and it's all videotaped and all that, and the Jamie Kennedy factor, which is in both movies. He is the biggest weakness, in my opinion,
of both films.
In the franchise.
Yeah,
I can't, in this one too, I just can't get past it. Like, maybe all of a sudden he starts to become an action hero when he was this videographer. Going back to Bloodlines, I never believed him as a videographer too, because you see him shake it, like aiming this camera very poorly. It's like a kid pretending like they're a camera person.
Yeah.
In the movie, but then all of a sudden he has the skills to be able to lead and do what he does in this movie, and I just didn't buy it. So I didn't think there could be a worse Tremors movie after Bloodlines, but unfortunately I didn't have the good time that you had.
Oh, really?
With A Cold Day in Hell. I just thought it was bad.
It is. I'm not even fighting.
But bad, like bad all around. I didn't care. I was excited for several cast members to be killed.
Yeah.
Like that scientist from Montreal. Who's does every wrong thing along the way. I mean, we're not supposed to like him.
Was it a French accent? What was that? What was it? It was somewhere between Kiwi and South African French.
I'm getting more entertainment out of you doing impressions of this than I got from the movie at all. I guess kind of going back, I'll go back to the beginning before. For reasons that I cannot understand, we do have a brief section of the movie Imperfection at the beginning.
That's right.
Which, makes me long for why can't it be set there. But poor Perfection, now apparently, it's just Bert alone running the store. He came up with some stupid excuse why the granddaughter was off somewhere else. So he now completely runs the store. The only people who seem to show up are this tax man who's trying to get money from him, and then when Jamie Kennedy comes in and says, "Oh, did you miss me?" And no, you can go back now.
Nobody missed you, Jamie.
Nobody missed you, Jamie. I'm so sorry to be so mean to this guy. He was good enough in the Scream movies.
He's great in 2 Scream movies and nothing else.
And I don't know, but and anyway, we'll get to the last movie in a second, but I have no idea. Did he say no to that? I mean, I can't imagine him saying no to anything.
Who said no to who would be interesting to find out.
Yeah, that would actually be a good question. But yeah, this was fortunately the last Tremors movie he was in. I actually thought he was going to be killed, and that's why I kept watching. I was like, oh, okay, this could save the entire movie if Jamie Kennedy's character gets killed. No, unfortunately not. There are spoilers for
that's fine.
Tremors 900 here, but I don't know. I guess I liked the character I liked the most was apparently Kevin Bacon's daughter, is randomly there, is the one who suggests that Bert come out and help them with this situation.
It's not that I forgot that, it's that I willfully block it out every time. It's like it's new, but it's not new every time it happens. Like, fuck this movie. But it's so exactly the thing that this movie would do at this point, right? It's just like right on the nose, right on the beak. It's just hitting you right on... Yeah, and the opening kill sequence, which is like the only sequence in the movie that tries to have snow in it.
That's right.
And it just doesn't look right at all. And then I start
computer heavy, or I mean, it felt like it was just a...
I don't know if it was just sand and they digitally made it look white, or if they painted sand white, but it was clearly not snow. It was clearly... No. And then later, as this progressed, I started feeling more and more sorry for some of the actors, because none of them would wear toques. They drew the line at toques, but a lot of them were wearing sweaters and gloves. And I've been to South Africa, okay? Yeah. I've been to South Africa during their winter. And let me tell you something. Their winter is fucking hot, okay? No. You're not wearing a sweater and gloves. Yeah.
The makeup person probably deserved an award for trying to patch up all the sweat. Yeah.
But, again... I'm not going to defend the movie. I agree, with everything you say. But like I said, I was laughing at the movie. I wasn't able to laugh at Bloodlines. I was kept on getting kind of slapped and offended by, the clumsiness of the screenplay.
Well, immaturity of it. I mean, it's...
And the pee jokes, everything like that.
But the climax is something else there. And, I mean, if you take those individual action scenes and you throw everything out of Bloodlines, I think you could have an entertaining... 20-minute whatever,
but this YouTube is a video. Weird. It's a combination of incompetence and ignorance that somehow blooms into something
I guess it
hilarious.
It tickled you enough, but
I'm like I said right out the gate, I'm laughing at it, not with it.
Yeah, but I know you don't like to laugh at movies
that's
necessarily.
Not something that I seek out.
No,
that's not something that I want, especially from a Tremors movie. But I'll take that over being bored, and I'll take that over being angry. But would I recommend this movie? No.
Okay, I just can't. Even if you're a Tremors fan and you're going, this will not be one of your favorite chapters. I don't know who would pick this as their favorite Tremors movie, right. But I a couple other secondary characters I wanted to mention.
Yep.
Okay, one has a right to be a little bit big. There was I don't know if he's East Indian, the young guy who Kevin Bacon's daughter is kind of the love interest, and he spends a lot of the time kind of up on this pole or something while the Tremors are below, and then he kind of turns into an action star at some point. He's drinking all these energy drinks throughout, so he's kind of big and jittery. I mean, unfortunately, they had to have another urine joke with that he causes a distraction because he drank 6 energy drinks, so he has so much he can just pee so powerfully that's going to distract the graboid or whatever.
Brent Maddock and S.S. Wilson, the writing team? I don't know if they grew up on a farm, but they seem really amused.
They seem to like functions. That. But anyways, and I guess that's amusing to some people, and those who like the comedy part of these. The one I can't understand, and he looks so much like an actor, and I'm just trying to figure out which actor from the Scream franchise, but he's not from Scream. But he was that guy who builds that electric fence to try to stop the graboid. That guy, if you told me that he had 10 energy drinks, I would understand. He plays every single moment so big. I mean, I was just like, what is this guy on coke? I mean, I don't know what was going on, because he is his
dial it back.
He makes Michael Gross plays it big, but he is in a completely different universe, to the point where even in what are we in the 6th chapter of Tremors, I'm just like, that is way, way, way too much.
Right.
It's interesting enough. He's not the worst part of the movie, but I'm like, none of this is built up. How is this guy
justify this to me?
Yeah.
I wanted to mention the director, Don Michael Paul, who's obviously different director than we've seen in the past. I don't know. I'm not going to judge him too harshly. I mean, he got to direct a Tremors movie, so he's doing better than most. But there's something I've noticed when a director becomes popular, a lot of young up-and-comers emulate them. Same thing with writers, too. Writers, when they first start writing, will emulate their favorite writer.
The Tarantino effect.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Tarantino's a great example of that. But like Altman with long shots, or when Soderbergh got popular, he started doing these freeze frames, and you started to see a lot of these freeze frame shots emulating him. Zack Snyder was really popular around the time this is, and this dude loves to do slow motion shots during the action.
I noticed that.
To the point where it actually, again, started to make me laugh how much he was leaning on the slow motion. It was like, this is like, man, I swear, you're padded an extra 10 minutes of this movie just because of all the fucking slow motion shots in it.
And this is 2018. This isn't like the first 2006 or something where that was really...
No, it's not new or anything like that, but I feel him Zack Snydering it, you know, making that move and being really excited about it. And I don't know, the first few times I just clocked it. The third or fourth time I got irritated, and then it was like a Monty Python sketch where it just went full circle, and I was like, slow-mo, yes!
I wonder if I had watched this with you, I might have been laughing and having a better time, and it might be ranking a lot higher for me, but...
Context helps. I remember doing...
I watched it by myself.
Right. I remember doing a review of the Rocky Horror Picture Show based on watching it by myself on a tube TV out in my garage.
Yeah. It's not the same.
That's not how you watch the Rocky Horror Picture Show. And so, like, if you wanted to watch this movie with a bunch of friends, drink some beer, and point and laugh, maybe you could have fun with it. But if you're looking for, like, a well-made, well-executed monster movie, stay far fucking away.
Yeah, this is like a Mystery Science Theater 3000 candidate
Absolutely.
if they revamp that,
Agreed.
You don't know what you're up against. I got this handled. You got a genetically enhanced giant carnivorous worm with tunneling abilities loose on your private island.
This species should be left to die.
What exactly are we talking about?
Shriekers.
We have 48 hours to stop these things.
Let's go, Ram boy.
Burt Gummer is a freaking legend.
Let's go.
Count me in.
She's culling the weakest from the herd first.
Crap, that means I'm next. Welcome to the party, Burt.
This has to end here. This is it. Lead, follow, or get out of my way.
I'll lead.
That's not an option.
And then we got to the 7th and, at least to the date of this recording, last Tremors movie, at least of the initial official run. This one stars John Hader, Napoleon Dynamite.
Yeah.
This is the exact right kind of actor that you would expect to see in a movie that's like Tremors 7, right? Like, he peaked in the late 90s, early aughts, kind of got stuck in a rut as an actor who would always have to play dumb, imbecilic, goofy characters. And, you know, he's still working, but well past his best before date as far as his popularity and whatnot. So, if you have to replace Jamie Kennedy, you know, I guess this makes sense, okay?
It does. It's funny that we're at the point now where we were trying to get like a Kevin Bacon replacement. Now we're trying to get a Jamie Kennedy replacement.
Yeah, a sock puppet would probably do.
I will say, I know you're trying to get the plot in here, but unlike all of those attempts to have a Kevin Bacon like character in there, this was a notch up.
Absolutely.
I was nervous. The first moments of the performance,
he falls out of a hammock.
Yeah, he falls out of a hammock. Makes some, instead of using the F word, he says fart or something.
Yeah.
And there's like, oh God, here we go again. But you get past that scene and he doesn't do an awful job.
No. Generally speaking, I will say, to my surprise, I just realized this is the same director of A Cold Day in Hell. And I'm going to say, on a directing standpoint, he has improved. Although he still does love him some slow motion.
He does, yes.
But it's less comically.
It's motivated. Like, it makes sense for...
There are moments that call for dramatic intensity that maybe slow motion can help you with. It's not just for the sake of it here. Generally speaking, though, I felt like this felt like a less funny, more dark, by Tremors standards.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as goofy, and it's not as light as previous chapters. And maybe that's because they were leaning into where the movie was going. I don't want to bury the lead here. But basically there's this tropical island, which the woman, I can't remember her name here,
Jamie Kennedy's mother
is running this place. Yeah. And
Jasmine. Yeah.
They see a lot of weird activity in the adjacent island, and they're not used to seeing people around. And upon investigating it, they find a graboid that's been destroyed. So shriekers have erupted from it. And basically we have kind of this most dangerous game type thing playing out, where there's these hunters coming to these islands to hunt the shriekers for sport. Richard Brake is sort of the most focused on of the hunters. He's got that grizzled face. And in the last 10 years, I've seen him show up in a lot of horror movies, particularly Rob Zombie movies.
Yes.
And I think he's a good actor, and he's got that unmistakable villain mug. And, like, I get the feeling like he's sort of boxed into the villain roles, but if given the chance, I bet you there's lots of other interesting stuff that he could do. And he seems like a much better realized version of the character that Billy Drago was playing in the Western version of Tremors.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
I think on every measure, this is an improvement on A Cold Day in Hell, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like...
Yeah. Big time.
The story makes sense. We find Bert is completely isolated and gone a little Howard Hughes. But...
And man, he looks old.
He looks
so old in that first scene. Oh.
But it was an amusing scene to bring him into. It was one of the quote more legitimately funny sequences of the movie, and I was amused that they wrote off Jamie Kennedy as being in a Mexican prison, and his mother and father both know he's in a Mexican prison, and neither of them seem particularly concerned about it. I'm sure prison all over the world, there's not a lot of great ones, but I'm guessing prison in Mexico is probably...
What was he doing? Smuggling magic mushrooms into Mexico or something?
I wonder if they even know or care. We're certainly not asked to care.
Of all the ways, and they've come up with some pretty convoluted ways to excuse the absence of characters in this franchise. This was one of the silliest, but I was so excited. I was just like, good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The only better way to handle it would have been to not mention him at all. Like, he's just persona non grata. But
that's not their style.
No. So what we have the ecological nature group who are preservationists and on the side of good. And we have the evil hunter group.
Yeah.
And they're, doing selfish bad things. And there's a clash between these two. And, again, I'm not enthusiastic about it, but I will say that it works enough that it will get a passing grade from me. There's a sequence where we have a couple of guards that are set out to the woods, and they play rock, paper, scissors to see who's going to go out into the woods and get fed to the shrieker first. And this is a kind of polite homage that I don't mind to the original movie, where it's like, yes, we remember that rock, paper, scissors, but they're not. I didn't feel them going,
remember that better movie?
Or there wasn't one who lost every time, because that was Val's problem. Like, even when he won, he lost in the original Tremors movie. But I like how that sequence played out, too. Like, this was the only real scene we were going to get with those two guards. So they spent about 5 minutes letting us get to know these two guards. And then they killed them.
Yeah. Which I appreciate.
Right? It was a little mini movie in the middle of it. And in another movie, it would be like the guy in the Western movie who was playing his instrument. As soon as he started playing his instrument and walking away from the fire, you're like, well, he's dead. Right? And so there was a little bit more thought put into this. Like I said, I think they sacrificed the comedy, but when they go too hard on the comedy, I would rather, if they're going to sacrifice something, that be where they sacrifice it. I don't want to oversell Shrieker Island, But I do want to say, and maybe it's just the contrast between Jamie Kennedy, John Heder as our new leading guy. Like, I will take John Heder. 100%.
He doesn't overplay his hand. I mean, he serves the story. He's an intelligent character, but he's not like the main guy. There are others, and it's more of a team thing. It's not,
he's not invincible.
It's not like, look at me every moment. Look how colorful and interesting I am.
Yeah.
He is just a guy who happens to be there, and I mean, they have the same thing where he has to kind of win over the trust for Bert, and Bert by the end of the movie is respecting and trusting him.
Yeah.
And they were trying to get the father-son dynamic that I think failed so miserably in the previous two movies. I don't know if it's because of the diminishing returns on the series that I went into Shrieker Island with zero expectations. I thought,
just watched two really
I thought
shitty
the
ones.
first four movies I'm giving a pass to, and then we moved into this generation of stupidity where the last three movies will just clearly be the worst, and that's all there is to it. This turns out to be one of my favorite Tremors movies, and it probably is because, and maybe it's a weakness in my my skills at reviewing or my taste or whatever, but I don't care for the comedy as much as like the action and the stakes and the scares. I mean, there's a scene, and we've talked about, or you've talked about this on your show, where you're so vulnerable in an outhouse.
Yeah.
There's a death in an outhouse.
Right.
We've seen this in other movies. I think there was, there are several homages to science fiction and action movies. I think there's a lot of Jurassic Park connected to this
Oh, absolutely.
movie. Yeah, hands down. I do like the idea that this Bill looks like Richard Branson, the billionaire who's gone up into space, and
not accidentally.
Yeah, no, there's a very clear message in there.
Yeah.
I thought that was good, and he has all of these.
The world's his playground.
Yeah, but he has all of these computer millionaires and billionaires going on a hunt for a graboid or whatever, just as like for entitled people to claim that they're hunters or whatever, which is similar to like African hunts for elephants and like there's all the stuff that's come out over the years. So there's a bit of a political message in there too. But I just think everybody was treating the material so seriously, but it was still fun. And so there's lots of references to, I think there's some Die Hard allusions. There's some lines which are similar to, there's like kind of an alien homage there where the one creature kind of licks Bert's face.
Yep.
I guess I had a lot of fun with it. I thought it was, in place of the comedy, we're getting these very obvious homages to the A-level films of this genre, and I think it's respectful. It's not like, hey, look how clever we are. It's said, and then they move on. There wasn't a whole lot where I was going wincing.
Yeah.
And I got used to wincing a lot in this series, and kind of like telling my brain, this is Tremors 400.
Yeah.
I don't need to think about it this hard. This isn't like Schindler's List here. I mean, but I got everything and more than I expected from this, and so it's going to rank
pretty
high because I would revisit it alone, and I know that I could have a good time with it any day of the week and twice on Sunday, and that, to me, that's a really, really good sign.
Well, I think you liked it more than I did, but
Yeah,
I still liked it
more.
quite a bit. But I can deal without the comedy, but as long as they don't lose the fun. To me, like, the fun is still an important ingredient.
I thought it was a fun movie.
And it is.
Yeah.
And it is.
Yeah.
But that would be the line that would be too far for me. So definitely go there.
I wanted to mention some of the supporting characters are interesting. I like this Freddy, Jackie Cruz, who is like this badass woman who, like, she's working in this eco, and then she says, yeah, but I'm not some vegan whatever.
Yeah.
And she knows about guns, and I think the movie would have been interesting if she was Bert's main sidekick.
Right.
but still, she has these great scenes throughout and is a very intelligent character and a nice addition to the team. If they were to revamp this in some way, I would like to see that character fleshed out a little bit more. And that actor, I was impressed by her. She made a meal out of a secondary performance when I didn't see other people.
She did represent for that sort of tough female character.
Yeah, we've seen that in like Aliens and movies for years, but I just like that actor and what she contributed. And she does that pep talk too to John Hader before he has to go out and onto the Shrieker Island with Bert and face a very dangerous situation. So to move to the elephant in the room. Yeah, spoilers if you haven't made it to the end of the Tremors.
I haven't watched this one with my boys yet, but I'm a little bit worried.
Yes.
Because Tristan's very invested with Burt Gummer. And unfortunately, we lose Burt, or we are very... Everything in the cinematic language is used to tell us that Burt died here. Yeah, and I guess I was a little bit surprised to see that happen. Like, I just figured, even if they knew it was going to be the last one, that I imagined Burt walking off into the sunset. For some reason, I didn't see getting eaten by a graboid the end of the story for Burt Gummer. I mean, it doesn't spoil the meal or anything for me. I just didn't see that coming. And it's not like they knew definitively this was going to be the last. Michael Gross, who's 72 years young, as of the interview that I read with him, said, if Shrieker Island makes enough money, Universal will probably make another Tremors movie. And if they want to do one, well, I'm still capable to make it, and I feel healthy enough to make it, I'll do it. So who knows? I don't know if they made that calculated choice, if they were actually going to pass the baton on to Hader, or if they knew this was the last entry. A lot of it feels up in the air. If this is the very ending of the series, I would say it maybe feels a little bit anticlimactic and rushed. It's like, where's Bert? Where's Bert? They find his baseball cap. We see a grave. Smash cut to credits.
Yeah. And then a bit of an homage to his, a bit of a clip show from the 7 movies of his greatest moments.
Whenever you go into clip show, you're kind of detached from the actual main focus of the movie. Usually, if you're going to kill a major character, it's got to be in service of something. And because he literally pushes Bill Hader out of the way, if this was like a passing of the baton, I think it would have sat a little bit better. I don't think it's going to sit well with Tristan no matter what, because he just wants this guy to live forever. I don't mind him dying. I just think it would have been better for me if it counted more, if it was just a little bit more epic. Not that it wasn't huge, but... It took 7 movies to get to this,
Here's what I would say. I would have been very disappointed if he had died, because they made it look like he could die in A Cold Day in Hell.
That would have been worse.
Then he dies in a piss poor movie.
Yeah.
This was at least, if this is the final chapter for whatever this segment is, this was a worthy final chapter.
Indeed.
And I think instead of extending and having some, like, they have a little bit of a funeral-ish type of a moment, but it's not like, spoilers for Marvel, but when they have like a half an hour to 45-minute, let's focus on the fact that this major character who's important to our universe has died, and let's mourn it and mourn it and mourn it.
How do you do it?
They got in and that's the end of the movie.
How do you do mourning and still have fun?
Yeah.
You don't.
I guess it was a downer of an ending, and maybe that's your point. And to me, it just struck me as kind of powerful. And I was like, wow, I like this character. Because I started off criticizing my first few times watching Tremors. This guy's such a cartoon character. And somehow, in all those viewings, he kind of got to me a little bit. So it impacted me. So it's definitely going to impact Tristan.
Yeah.
But I was just like, I felt respectful in some way.
Yeah. No, I'm not mad at it.
They didn't make a meal out of it. And I would rather, if in fact this is the end of Michael Gross with this series, I'm glad he's going out on a good movie, not A Cold Day in Hell or Bloodlines or another movie which is worse.
I called the previous movie ignorant and incompetent, and this movie is neither of those things.
Here's the other thing I think to give A Cold Day in Hell, because I was pretty hard on it. Maybe more credit than it deserves, 'cause same director for the last two movies.
Yeah.
There's a line in there where Bert says, I will decide when I die.
Yeah.
And he makes the decision
He does.
when he dies in this movie. So that line actually had a payoff in Shrieker Island. So maybe there was maybe I'm giving it too much credit that there was a plan.
Yeah.
From at least from the last two movies, because and it's not nice to say. I mean, it sounds very ageist when I say it, but the last two movies, I was like, good
old.
Lord, he looks a lot older than my vision of what.
And there is
the actor and the character look like.
As much as I don't necessarily want Bert to die, I don't necessarily want to see sad old
screw him.
Yeah.
From Legends of the Fall with Anthony Hopkins.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's very Bert Gummer to go out flipping the bird into the maw of the beast.
Yeah.
So points. Again, I think that if anything might split some of the hardcore fans of the thing, but again, if that's what they were going to go, I admire, I respect the choice.
Mm-hmm.
I respect the choice. And yeah, thank you for not finishing on Cold Day in Hell. So 7 Tremors movies have been discussed on the 200th episode of Rank and Review.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for being here. You suspect that we're not going to go 7
I don't think so. No, there's 2 movies there that I liked more than you did.
Yeah.
And then there's some that I was a little bit harder on, perhaps, than you were. So I don't know. We'll see how many are similar and how many.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and bank that A Cold Day in Hell made the bottom of your list. But tell me, am I wrong?
You're not wrong.
Nice.
No, I went into this and I thought for sure Bloodlines is going to be dead blast. I thought, how could you be worse than Bloodlines? And then, much to my surprise, Bloodlines' thumb is still down. Don't get me wrong here. But I was just like, okay, I anticipated and I focused so much on the worst parts of Bloodlines the first time I saw it that I kind of, auto-corrected, or I don't know if that's the right term, but I focused on everything else this time, and there's some good action in Bloodlines. I just didn't think anything really worked in A Cold Day in Hell.
Right.
Nothing worked, and I wish I had watched it with you and had the good time laughing at it, but I just was just like, it just felt kind of pointless. And it's leading to something that it doesn't follow through with. And, I mean, there's some characters who die, predictably, but none of the really important people die. So what are the stakes?
Yeah.
And it was just kind of a useless chapter in the series. And we had to have another movie with Jamie Kennedy. So it was 7. Number 6 is Bloodlines. I mean, I don't know where it would rank if I didn't look at 15 minutes of Bert Gummer drinking his own urine or getting pissed on by a lion, or...
It was like the lion was pissing on us, though.
Yeah, it was. But yet, I almost think that Jamie Kennedy was pissing on the whole series of that movie. So those were the only 2 that I would not recommend to anybody. The rest are positive, and it's just kind of pick your poison, I guess, going forward. Much to my surprise, number 5 is Tremors 3 Back to Perfection.
Okay.
As you mentioned, special effects are not fantastic. I like that we're in perfection. I like that we revisit some characters. Some it's kind of glossed over a little bit more. But this is another one too where, I mean, I guess we lose Miguel, but really, like, not that many people were harmed.
No, it's a pretty safe movie.
Yeah, and I don't know. It wasn't as great for me, but it was fine. Number 4, Tremors 2 Aftershocks. I'm really glad Fred Ward's in it, and but this is another one where all of the characters, we lose a character, and it's not the only movie, as you said, where characters just disappear.
Yeah.
But we lose a character, and then all the characters with brown skin get killed off, and our Caucasian characters are pretty safe. And then, like this, the kind of the Kevin Bacon replacement, he just disappears. I think there is some excuse given. Don't they go off and they open a theme park or something?
Yeah.
Is the excuse why neither of them are in the next movie, but I don't know. It's pretty lame as far as that goes.
But our investment was pretty minimal, I think, in Mr. Sawyer.
But the setting, if we're going to have a movie that's not in perfection, I think this was probably the best for setting. Setting in Mexico was okay. I'm shocked, really shocked that for me, number 3 was Tremors Shrieker Island, but I had a much better time with it, I think, than you did.
Okay.
And I would happily just on its own revisit it any time. And I think, maybe if Tremors didn't exist, then this might be one of the highlights of the series. But I don't know if my love of Westerns has gone out of control, but for some reason, I enjoy Tremors 4, The Legend Begins. I had a smile on my face through the whole thing. I know that there are problems with it.
Yeah.
It's not like a full 4 or 5 star endorsement of this movie, but just from the enjoyment I got and the chance for Michael Gross to do something different than he's asked to do in any of the other movies, and to see some character development and see this rejection turning into perfection.
Right.
I guess I'm a sucker for it, and that's why it's number 2. Tremors 4, The Legend Begins. But yes, and we revealed it at the beginning of the show, Tremors, shockingly, is the best of the Tremors franchise. So to me, it was kind of, there's Tremors, and there's 6 other movies that are competing for spots 2 to 7. And
we both put it number 1, hey? It's almost like it could be one of the best movies of the 90s. Anyway. Well, look, we're
going horror movies for 1990. Sure, I'll go with you on that one.
Just 1990? No. Look, we're not going to go 7 for 7.
No.
I don't think we're going to scrap. It's funny that we have a couple of significant differences, but whatever. I think you're right. After the bottom 2, it gets kind of highly personal in a way, like what works for you and what doesn't. I did put Bloodlines dead last.
Yeah.
There is a prolonged sequence we keep going back to with Bird in a cage that just is nowhere near as funny as it thinks it is. And there's something about something that thinks it's hilarious and it's not, that becomes really fucking hard to look at. Like,
it's sad.
Yeah, it really pisses me off. And the few things that it does right become wasted opportunities in the movie. It's like close enough to being a good movie that it starts pissing me off at times. And then, Jamie Kennedy comes in and lets out one of his zingers and takes me out of the movie. He's neither charming nor, effective, nor he doesn't bring anything to the table. So I had to put Bloodlines last. Mm-hmm. In a just world, maybe technically speaking, Cold Day in Hell could take that proud position of the bottom. But again, I was appalled into gales of laughter at the abject ignorance of Canada, and not just that they were ignorant about it, but that they were banking that every single person that watched the movie knew nothing about Canada. Like, that alone is funny. And then the slow motion, and then just the really obvious character beats, and it's just like, wow, you guys, this is by the numbers to a kind of ludicrous degree. But I did laugh. Whereas in Bloodlines, I didn't even laugh. I just sort of stared at it aghast. It was like so bad that it made me question my whole relationship with Tremors. And whereas Cold Day in Hell was just like, it had this holy shit factor to it. It's hard to put your finger on. And again, this is not the type of movie that I seek out. Some people really love a so bad it's a good movie. And if you're one of those people, well, check out A Cold Day in Hell. But like, if you're a person that likes Tremors movies, maybe not. Maybe not. All the way in, I guess this would be 5th place, is where I put The Legend Begins. And again, I still put this on the positive side of the spectrum. Like, again, sure, check out these 4 of the Tremors, or 5 of the Tremors franchise, if you're into what we're talking about. They're dumb fun, and this is dumb fun. But this one, I felt constantly like I was ahead of, and more so than some of the other ones, flaws and all. It was the closest where I felt to being bored at times. It's just how I feel. Plus, I have something personal about Billy Drago, apparently. There's something about that guy that pisses me off. I don't know what it is.
He's not in the movie long enough to spoil the meal completely, but...
And he's been way worse in other movies. Like, he's not terrible in this one.
He's a cartoon in it, and...
He does what's asked of him, but I don't know. So I wasn't super excited about that, but I wasn't super excited about Back to Perfection, which made 4th place. And, you know, a lot of the same pluses and minuses. They're trying to do fan service to people who love the original movie, so it's hard to hate it for that. But you're constantly reminded of that other better movie, which is also hurting this one. And again, the Ass Blasters was never my favorite. So... there it was. All the way in 3rd place was where I put Shrieker Island. And I think that's where you put it as well. I still think you probably liked it more than I do, but we ended up ranking it in the same place on the grid, which says something. Again, it felt like they took risks in a way that they hadn't taken risks in the other ones, or in a way that actually paid off. Whereas in the other ones, maybe if they did take risks, they were kind of in the wrong direction. So I appreciate the guts of the movie, and I'm curious to see where we go going forward. My guess is that they'll probably go the direction of the reboot. You're right, but
maybe.
That seems to be intuitively the right way to go. Like, why resurrect them just to end the series again? But who knows?
If we have another movie and the first scene is his hand coming out of the grave,
be
like,
oh dear, or climbing out of the gore of the debris or whatever.
I hope not.
Of all of the Tremors sequels, the one that I increased in liking the most, I think, upon revisiting, was Tremors 2 Aftershocks. But I'll drop the caveat that I watched it with my kids, and they both loved it. So the energy of that in the room probably fed into the experience of it. But again, I think almost as good as the first movie, this movie makes the best use of the Michael Gross character. Burt Gummer is at his most gummery-est in this movie. And I think we knew who he was in the first movie. This kind of makes him into a proper hero. I guess he earns the step into the leading role for his play in the second movie. And though I would have loved to see Kevin Bacon, it's always nice to have Fred Ward in your movie. I've seen Fred Ward in terrible movies. He's like in one of the Crow sequels. He did one of the Crow sequels. Right. And I remember, like, even on this, you're kind of embarrassed to be in this Crow movie. But you know what? You don't suck in this Crow movie.
He gives it his all.
Yeah. And I don't know. So I'm affectionate towards him. But yeah, what was going to be number one? What was going to, of course. It really is up there. Like, when people ask me, like, do you have a favorite movie? My usual counter argument is, can we go by genre? Can we, like, narrow the field, like, a little bit? Question. Like, you can't just hit me with that. Tremors is in the conversation. Not that it's, like, better than The Shawshank Redemption or, like, you know, a lot of these other great classic important movies that I value, but it's right next to my heart. It's just what I want out of my kind of fun horror escapist entertainment. When I don't want to be devastated, but I don't want to necessarily have to think too much, I want to have fun, but I want there to be stakes. It's just, I can come back to it. It's number one. And who knows how long Tremors will go on. Maybe it will outlive me. But as far as I'm concerned, it will always be number one.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. And it was the second best 1990s horror movie.
Correct.
Very different than the Blair Witch Project,
That's
which was
right.
your number one.
But the Blair Witch Project kept me up at night a couple times.
Yeah.
Whereas, as much as I love Tremors, I don't think I lost any sleep over it.
But you should have laughed at me when I put Blair Witch Project as number 30. Yeah.
At least it was on your list.
It was on the list. Yeah.
Tremors didn't make the list.
Well, yeah. I have to look at that list again. But still,
right.
every time I watch Tremors, I like it more and more. And the stuff that used to bother me. But I still go back to that initial time watching it, not knowing anything about it, watching it on television. It wasn't edited for TV, which was nice. And like, wow, this is a really entertaining, and this is actually kind of horrific too. I mean, they're not pulling punches. I thought it was going to be some sort of a light thing because Reba McEntire and the dad from Family Ties was in there. No. And Kevin Bacon, who I'd become a fan of through a bunch of roles he had in the 90s at that time. I'm like, wow, like this is pretty good. And but then when I started to look at it as a critic, I think I was just looking for stuff to be hard on and just enjoy the experience. And Tremors, all of these, I think you just can have a good time with. Just 5 of them are good and 2 of them are bad.
Yeah. Well,
and one's much better than.
And these are movies; they're not films. But the thing is that the things I tend to revisit are movies.
Mm-hmm.
I can sit here and say, Mystic River, that's a great movie. I don't think I ever want to watch it again. But it was a really well acted, compelling, heartbreaking story. But I'll watch Tremors on a whim. Somebody, like, I get introduced to somebody, or someone gets married into the family or something like that, we're hanging out, and I happen to find out they haven't seen Tremors. I'm going to make it a fucking mission. I'm going to fix
watch
that.
Tremors, yeah.
I will fix that for you this very night if we can make it work. Like, so...
You just got married into the family.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Now forget about your honeymoon. We're watching Tremors.
This is a rite of passage.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to have it. Thank you for being here for the 200th
Well, thank you and congratulations on 200 episodes. And
thank you.
I look forward to the next 200.
Well, we're going to take a hiatus.
Yeah.
I want to produce some episodes. I want to have some in-person interviews, high-quality content, high-quality, being able to hear it. And I want to, so when I come back for the next season, be in a confident, good place.
Yeah.
Less solo shows, more classic R&R.
Yeah.
And I'm certain that we're going to hear more from Mr. Dubray. And do check out that Shelf-Shutting Movie Show. I always try to mention it every show. Sometimes I forget. I apologize. But we're here for you.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to having you back on the show.
It's happening soon.
Yeah. And I've been struggling lately to have... I'm starting a series of solo shows right now.
Right.
So I'm kind of feeling the pain that you have been going through the last while.
Yeah.
And I had to do a little bit of a hiatus as well to try to get some more episodes together. So we'll see what happens. But as far as we're recording this at the start of October, and so I'm going to do some solo shows about 31 Days of Horror. I'm trying to see horror movies I've never seen before.
Right.
And also play this game that Scott Lehman has created. I don't know how many years he's done this, but
Halloween is like Christmas, his birthday, and New Year's all wrapped up into one box for him. He just loves it. Well, yeah, thanks again, and listen to the Shelf-Shutting Movie Show. We're gonna go. This is the end of season 8 of Rank and Review. It might be 2022 before we get new episodes. So, in the interim, the Shelf-Shutting Movie Show, kids. Thank you so much, as ever, for listening to Rank and Review. This is your host and random Canadian Larry Parsons. And know that the Tremors franchise is a very near and dear thing to my heart, especially that first motion picture. So yeah, I usually say that I drop every other Wednesday, but I think it may be 2022 before we hear new episodes of Rank and Review. There's a whole bunch of reasons for that, but largely I want to bank some episodes. I want high quality as far as the recording quality episodes for you guys to listen to, and I just want to be prepared with a nice, good slate of podcasts for you when I come back. And I am. Wheels are turning on this right now. In your future, you'll get the return of fan favorite Mr. Matthew Risling to the podcast. We're going to talk about the Hellraiser franchise. We're going to talk about some more Star Wars films. We're going to talk about more Marvel movies. And there's a lot of interesting things moving forward. I have a lot of plans in the works. I'm just going to ask you guys to give me a little time to bring those plans to fruition. I can't believe that I've made it to 200 episodes. I'm incredibly grateful to everyone and anyone who listens to the show, who talks about the show, who mentions the show to the friends, who shares the show with other people. By listening to my show, you're my friend. We'll see you in a few months, people. And thank you, as always, for listening to Rank and Review.